everybody. We will start in a couple of minutes to let people connect. A few minutes, and then we will begin.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Magnus, your name is displaying as Nina.
Well, that's interesting. I am Magnus Olden, even though it says I am Nina, but it shouldn't make a difference anyway. 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll begin. I think we have every panelist that needs to be here at least for now. But yeah,
Hey,
give it.
Magna. Henry Calvert speaking, just doing a sound check.
Perfect.
Hi, Henry. Loud and clear. Hi, all.
Hey, Kevin. Hi, Jill.
Hey, Henry, how are you?
Getting there.
Getting where?
Exactly. Reading your LinkedIn with interest.
You're only, yeah, I know exactly where you're getting to.
Cheers, mate. Cul-de-sac again.
Okay, I think we'll start in about 30 seconds, and then that should give people enough time to log on. Okay, we'll begin there. So, hey, and welcome to the Understanding Network API webinar. This is the second out of 2 webinar events that we have been hosting. The first one was targeted mostly at developers who want to leverage network APIs. And today we are targeting the operator audience, anyone who operates a network. And it's a knowledge sharing event. With lots of great participants who are going to talk about the opportunities, the challenges, and show some cool examples of what is possible with network APIs. I'm Magnus Olden, not Nina Stolpestad, as my Zoom account is telling you. So I'm the CTO of Domus. Domus is a company that is hosting these webinar events. And that's my opening remarks. So a couple of housekeeping options. So we are recording this. So anything you say can and will be used against you. There is a Q&A section, and especially these first sessions with Kamara and GSMA are meant to be interactive. So please ask questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat. It makes it a lot easier for us to keep tabs on which questions have been answered and whatnot. So that, with that said, I'll go quickly through the agenda. So the first session is with the Kamara project. They will talk a bit about what they are and the network API ecosystem and use cases and benefits and the existing APIs. Kamara will keep on going after the break, and this is with Alicia Miller, who is the treasurer of the Kamara project and also worked for Verizon, and Marcus, who works for Deutsche Telekom as well, and Jill Lovato, who works for the Linux Foundation. Then we will have a Q&A with GSMA and Henry. So again, like if you just ask the questions right away, I will ask them when it's their turn. Then there will be a short break, and we will go into a couple of others talks, which are 15-minute each. You can still ask questions, and if there's time, we will go through them. So first, we have Jeff and developer problems with network slicing from Rakuten, and Kevin Smith from Vodafone, who has been doing network APIs for 25 years, and maybe there's something we can learn from that. Paul from Cable Labs, who will talk about the wireline perspective of network APIs or network as a service. And then we have Thomas from Relab, who will talk about experiences of exposing network APIs. And Kevin from Shabudi on driving growth and innovation with network APIs. And with that said, I think I will just hand it over to our first speakers from the Kamara project, and that is Alicia and Marcus. Are you both here? Hope you are.
Yep. I'm here. All right, let me, I should have tried to see if I can actually share. Yes, here we go. All right, hi everyone. I am Alicia Miller from Verizon. I'm also the treasurer in Kamara. I sit in Verizon's B2B business unit in the product team that owns network APIs. And I've been working on this for several years now. And I'm excited to talk to you about Kamara and the network API ecosystem. Got some background noise. So I think the first question maybe on everyone's mind is, what is Kamara? So we'll start there and we can go into that a little bit deeper later, but I want to start with, what is Kamara? So we're an open source project. We sit within the Linux Foundation. Anyone can join Kamara as a contributor, a member. Everything is open source. We work on these interoperable API specifications as people want to kind of pursue them. We work closely with GSMA to also prioritize what these APIs are that we work on together. We have leveraged all of the great work that Linux Foundation has done over the years in these open source projects to make this really kind of a formal way of releasing APIs and updates and helping different operators to implement them on their networks. What are we trying to solve as Kamara? So we want to get to scale. We want to help developers scale, write an application once and then deploy globally. Sorry if there's background noise. We want to be consistent across all the markets that we operate in. We don't want a single. Can you guys hear that background noise? Just checking.
Yes, it sounds like a whale.
So sorry, it's been very quiet here all morning. If you give me a moment, I will move into a different room. Hold on.
Some technical difficulties with background noise here. I guess I can spend time. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that. All right, so I moved into a different room. It's quiet all morning, and then all of a sudden they do construction next door. All right, so we also would like to achieve, in addition to scale, we want consistency across networks, right? We want it to be easy for developers to deploy across different telcos, across different geographies. We also want to make it simple, so we're trying to abstract away all of the complexity from a telco network for developers. We want to make it also accessible. So it's open source. Everyone, like I said, anyone can join. You don't have to pay to be a contributor or a member. Everything is on GitHub. All the information about how to join different calls is on there as well. And then we want it to be demand driven. We're not just creating APIs because people want to create them. There needs to be enough demand for the APIs, not only from developers, but also willingness from telcos to actually implement these APIs. A little bit more on the Kamara scope here. So if you look at, first, you've got the telco service exposure platform kind of at the bottom, right? We expose these APIs into different areas. Sometimes it's going to be a hyperscaler, sometimes it'll be an aggregator, sometimes it'll be a telco owned portal. But all of that is enabled through different telco exposure platforms. And then those get made available to the end customer, either again by a hyperscaler aggregator or directly from the telco portal. So these are all really going to be Kamara APIs, right? The standardized specification APIs. This is kind of simple version of what it looks like in the different channels. And then I want to also address, there's a lot of organizations that work in this space. And so how are we similar? How do we work together and how are we different? So if I start with kind of GSMA and Open Gateway on the upper right, you can think of GSMA as trying to solve the business problems for these APIs, how to help telcos implement them, tell the story internally, align together on different points, such as creating contract agreement templates, things like that. Kamara is really the technical development for all of these APIs, right? That all of it's being actually developed within Kamara on GitHub, like I mentioned. Kamara goes to conferences and events to promote this with different audiences and really drive API adoption, not only among telcos, but also among developers. And then all of these groups work closely with TM Forum, which is creating APIs and other processes that are going to facilitate the flow of APIs across all these different channels. I think TMF 931, also known as the Operate APIs, is another as an example of one of the things that TM Forum has created that helps share information across the different platforms between telcos, hyperscalers, aggregators. Why should telcos participate? I've talked a lot about here's what it all looks like, here's who's participating, why as a telco do you want to participate in this? So I think kind of the first question is what's different now? We've tried this before, but maybe it wasn't, the environment wasn't right for everyone to succeed. But I think we've changed in the way that we implement our networks. There's more software-defined networking. The network capabilities can be more easily accessed in this way. So I think that's one of the key differences now from previously when we tried to do it. There's also a ton of support, a groundswell. We've got in GSMA Open Gateway, 65% of mobile connections. We've got over 340 companies participating in Kamara today. So there's really that, I think we've hit that tipping point in participation. But why is everyone participating? How have we gotten to that 65% of mobile connections? So firstly, it reduces friction for developers. So they can write the API once into their application and deploy it globally. It really makes it a lot easier for them to access the same network information across many, many different telcos, many geographies. It also, by doing that, it increases the usage of and value of telco networks, because now we are providing access to network information and network capabilities that we haven't ever done before. And we're doing it in this way that's really easy and simple and seamless for developers. And all of that allows developers to create new applications, new solutions, because they can access these capabilities that allows them to differentiate their application from other applications and make that user experience really special. All of this leads to additional revenue, and we're monetizing existing assets, right? We already have these network capabilities. We're just now allowing access to them in a really, really simple way. And we can leverage SDN and NFV to do that. So I think that's it. I'm hoping that was really clear and everyone's like, yes, I totally see the benefits to telcos. This is certainly what we see at Verizon, monetizing the existing assets in a really kind of SaaS model is what's driving this for us. So I think Marcus is next, but if there's any questions, pop them in the Q&A and I can try to answer
There
them.
haven't been any questions yet, so you're maybe a bit too clear on what you're saying, Alicia. So if you can make it like a bit less clear, then that would be great.
Sure.
We will get a very interactive session.
Just do it.
Okay, Marcus, you want to take it from here?
I can do. So thanks a lot, Magnus. Thanks a lot, Alicia. I'm Marcus from Deutsche Telekom. I had the great honor and chance to lead the API initiative within Deutsche Telekom for the last 4 years. Now we have changed to a line organization for it, and I also am part of the line organization. But my second head, it's Kamara. I was in from the beginning, and now I am the chair of the outreach committee. So that's the reason why I'm sitting here. I want to start with the topics Alicia has mentioned. The telco industry currently is in a dilemma. We have a lot of expenses in the 5G infrastructure, in all the spectrum licenses, and it's not possible to monetize it completely by our SIM cards, by the connectivity business. So the industry is really looking for additional revenues, and these network APIs could be a good initiative. In the moment, it seems like a good success. We have learned out of the mistakes of the past. So we are exposing APIs which are intent-based and not too technical, so that they are easy to use, easy to consume for developers. We are fast, so we are doing the standardization via open source. We try to have it agile, to create a first version, bring it out, and then learn from it and have the customer voices for it and improve it. And we have the CEOs behind. That's also a big difference in the past. And at the moment, it looks like we have a good momentum, and it looks like it can be successful. But for that, we need the coverage for these APIs. And that's the reason why I'm sitting here. We are only successful if we have the APIs in as lot of telco networks as possible, because only that will ensure that we have a scalable business. And for that reason, we are sitting in one boat. We only win together, and that's the reason why we're here. So now I can also start with a couple of slides, which I've prepared. Let me share. Hopefully I can. How can I see here? That's the right one. So hopefully you can see it. Let me put this little window away. Good. Here I have summarized some possible areas where we can start. One area which is in the moment a very good starting point is the fraud area. We get more and more digital business on this planet, and unfortunately also fraud is increasing dramatically. And so we have a growing demand to prevent fraud. So the business demand is there. People are willing to pay for it. And from a technical point, these APIs are easy to build. And the third topic is the regulation. From a regulation and data privacy side, it's also easier in this area because we are already in touch with the country authorities, and they are willing to make compromises between the usability of the APIs and data privacy things, because it's always, we have to find the right balance between the two ones. And in this area, it seems to be easier. So in the moment, it seems that that is a good starting point. If you look later on the existing APIs, the productive APIs, the good bunch of it is in this area. So we can consider it as a good starting point. And from that, it's possible to move in other areas like location. For location, yes, you need sometimes the consent of the end user, as long as you want to have the location of a user device. It's easier to have the location of an IoT device like a drone. But a lot of customers are asking here, for example, logistic companies, to get a notification if a truck reaches a certain store that they can prepare to get the load. Or drone companies to check if a drone is allowed to start, even to find a drone which has crashed. So you can look into the network and find the last location where it has been to collect the parts of it. So that is also a very good next topic. And then the other two ones, enhanced communication and video production, they are related to the quality of the mobile connection. That is the most valuable good which the telcos have, because it's about bandwidth, and it's a limited resource. So we should use it very careful, but we also think of use cases there. The left one, the enhanced communication, are the use cases where you only need certain bits, which then are communicated very reliant and very fast. So that could be, for example, remote control of any moving object, from a drone up to a complete car on an HEV in a factory, or transactions which are done on a point of sales. So any billing devices in a big stadium, for example. That means only a few bits which have to be transferred with high priority, with lowest latency, very reliable. And these cases could also be a good opportunity. And then video production, it's a specific case that turns out as also a very interesting area which can be used. So that could be potential areas, but it's depending from country to country, I think, and each of the telcos have to find their best way on it. Looking on the APIs, which are currently in the market, you can see that the SIM swap, number verify, one-time password, even these know your customer APIs, they are all related to fraud. So that's why I mentioned that fraud could be a good starting point. But we already see APIs around location here, like the device location or device status roaming, and even the first APIs about quality and demand, also in the home Wi-Fi. So these are already there in the market, and further APIs are in work. I don't want to go through all the details here. If you are interested, you can find it in the Camara slides. There is a very short description of it, and you can have a very detailed if you join the Camara GitHub and look into the READMEs of the different sub-projects. So if you are interested to find out which APIs are really there as productive versions, I would recommend to go to the GSMA homepage of Open Gateway, and there you can find an operators map where you can select the country and the API, and then you get the operators which are offering it. Unfortunately, it's not possible to jump directly to the operators portal. That was possible in the old version of this portal, but I have included the secret link to it. Here you can find also the countries, and here you get then the operators and the operator portals behind. So I have already addressed that to the GSMA that we can improve the operators map with that, but you can use the secret link in the meantime. If you have further questions to that, today we have him, the master of Open Gateway, the Pope of Open Gateway, Mr. Henry Calbert. So note down all your questions, and in a few moments, in a few minutes, you can ask him directly. Good, then I want to finalize my part in telling you what does it really mean if you want to implement the network APIs in your network. You have to do 3 things. The one, you have to develop the APIs and products itself based on your network capabilities, the existing capabilities, and using the standards, the API definitions of Camara. The second thing, you have to implement an exposure infrastructure. What this does mean, I will tell you in a few seconds. For that, you should use the standards defined in Open Gateway and in TM Forum. We saw a little picture of Alicia a few minutes ago, but I will go into that more detailed. And then the last thing is you have to define the commercial products. So decide about the pricing models and the prices and the channels to which you want to sell it, but also about the aggregation. So it makes sense to have an aggregator in the countries because for certain APIs you need a certain coverage. So that's all in this third part. If you have done these 3 points, you can move on and sell it. That's a simple thing. Good, now let's look into the second point. That is the more complicated. What does that mean? What does an exposure infrastructure mean? I tried to summarize a typical flow to use APIs. So at the bottom, you can see the network capabilities which you have typically in your network. So mobile capabilities, fixed line capabilities, IT capabilities, all kind of data around SIM cards and contracts and networks and congestion, but also your cloud capabilities and edge cloud capabilities. And you probably have also internal API gateways to connect all these things. So what it makes sense is to have a service exposure platform as a single point to the outside, that you have a control point for the APIs. And by this layer, you then can serve your own portal, but also, yeah, that's for the enterprise customers, for the B2B customers, but also you can serve all the aggregators, hyperscalers, system integrators, so the wholesale part of the business. And the typical flow is it starts with the API catalog. So you are working on your APIs and you're building the API catalog, which is then hosted on your service exposure platform. And this catalog then can be published via the operate APIs of TM Forum to the portal, but also to the wholesale aggregator hyperscaler portals. And by that, customers can access it and can see it. That is the first step. If then a customer is interested, the next step is to onboard him. So customer goes to the portal, puts in his name and credentials, and then these are communicated also via the operate APIs to the service exposure platform. You can do now a check towards your internal systems, so called know your customer check, that you can see if it's already a customer of your company, or if there are some other checks. And then if all okay, you can create that custom here at the service exposure platform. And yeah, that's it. The next step then is customer will order an API. So that's also going through the operate APIs down to the service exposure platform. Here, then it is checked. Do we need the consent of the customer for that API? For example, if we want to have a location API, if the consent is not given, then a pop-up comes to the customer where he has to confirm his consent, and then the consent is stored here in the APIs, in the service exposure platform. So as a result then, at the end, the credentials to access the API are sent back via the operate APIs. So that's mainly the URL for the API, but also the access tokens, which is the passport to access the API. And then customers can use it. The metering and the rating is done in the service exposure platform. And at the end of the month, a bill is created and sent back to the internal billing systems, which you surely have, and you can earn the money. So that's the simple thing, how it works. And it's a combination of the Camara standards, of the TM Forum APIs, and of the contracts, the commercial contracts and playbooks, which are developed and defined by Open Gateway. So that's my part. Hopefully it was interesting. If you have questions, then please feel free and answer directly or in the chat. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, we have set aside about 10 minutes more for your talks. So I'll start asking some questions. I'll try to keep the questions that I see are clearly for GSMA for later, because Henry is coming later. But I'll just start asking here. So Marcus, what do you have in mind with metering and billing exactly?
Yeah. So depending on the API, you have to measure the usage of the API. For some APIs, you simply count the API calls. For some APIs, you want to count the minutes. For some APIs, you want to count the data volume. It's depending on the API and your pricing model, how you want to measure the usage. That is about the metering. And it could be very complex models. So for example, you can think of quality and demand. The first seconds are very cheap, and the longer you use it, the more expensive it gets. Or you can check what is the situation in the cell. Is it congested, and how much congested is it? And depending on that, the price is higher or lower. So all that kind, that's the metering, that's the collection of the required data, which is then used for the rating. And the rating is simply taking the metering, multiplying with the pricing, using the pricing models. So at the end that you get a final bill. So that's a simple thing. But in reality, if you look in, it can be very complex.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Because, well, getting quality on demand would be very different because, well, it's you are sharing a constrained resource and maybe someone is paying extra for it. So that's a very different billing than asking a location, right? Which you can ask infinite location. It is not a constrained resource, but it's a beneficial API. Okay, so a couple more questions. So common question that we had a lot of talks about last time as well was this multi-network dimension. So another question here is, for example, there's number verification APIs. Will this work on Wi-Fi as well by default, or is there any plans to do it?
So we already had done some checks on our network because we had the same question for our network in Germany. And it turned out on our side that the device is connected both to the Wi-Fi and to the mobile mobile network. And so this number verify works nevertheless. So it's a situation in DT network in Germany. Don't know if it's the same case in the other networks, but it's a good question.
Yeah, but in general, I guess we can say that, well, there is at least one talk later from Paul in Cable Labs about this, the wireline or fixed or home network angle as well. So there's definitely work going on there. So I will encourage everyone who has a question about that to stay on and listen to the talk from Cable Labs as well. So like I'll just keep asking these questions, and Alicia, feel free to jump in if you think Marcus is not the right person to answer this question. So another question that came up is, can we use Kamara APIs in CPaaS or CCaaS platforms as well? And just before I give it to you, I know there's a couple of speakers later this evening that will talk about something similar, but Alicia, Marcus.
Oh, I'll let go Alicia first.
I was actually going to let Marcus answer this one. I'm not. It seems more. I'm not sure what a CCaaS platform is.
That's typical Vonage, Twilio, these.
We've been calling that CPaaS. I hope that's what is meant by that question.
Yeah, if it's not, please re-ask the question.
I know I saw that question somewhere, but now I can't find it.
No, it was in the chat, so it's more difficult.
I can try to give my 5 cents, if that's okay. I think CPaaS are more about the what. So to automate calls, SMS, emails, meetings, real-time communication, it's about the what. The network APIs are about the how. So what's the quality, what's the location? And it's a good opportunity to combine both. So for example, having a real-time call supported by low latency, quality and demand. And for that, it's good to have it on the same platforms. That's my personal view on that.
I also see someone said that CCaaS is contact center as a service. So
Oh,
And Umesh also said clarified. I don't know that I can answer the contact center as a service. If I were to talk about the CPaaS platforms, I would say that you can, yes, thanks, Kim. You can, the CPaaS providers today are going to add the Kamara APIs to make their existing CPaaS offerings more robust and offer additional services, create more like I want to say bigger, but that's not the right word, like bigger service APIs with more functionality baked into them. That's how I see it playing out in the CPaaS. You could basically, any application can call these APIs if given permission. So CCaaS is an application. You could use these APIs through an application like that. But I think it's worth mentioning that these APIs are really meant to work on cellular networks and on landline networks, wireline networks. So if someone is using Wi-Fi, these aren't going to be quite as powerful. So if you're talking about like a contact center and someone's calling in from a mobile phone, for example, that platform could call some of these APIs to identify someone or verify their identity. So if you think about a bank, they're using these platforms. They might use the number verify API and the SIM swap API to see, okay, is this person who they say they are? Is it, has the SIM been swapped in the last 24 hours? Yes or no? If it has, okay, maybe I might do some extra identity checks to make sure that this person really is the person that's tied to this account or is the person they say they are. So as long as the application is calling the API and the end user is on a cellular or wireline network, that's really where the value lies.
cool. And I think in general, it's fair to say that one of the things that Kamara is doing is to also make it easy for aggregators, right? So whether that aggregator is a CPaaS or CCaaS or hyperscaler, like one of the points is making it easy for them so that you can make it even easier for developers. Is that fair assessment? Okay, then I'll ask. There's been a couple of questionnaires on location APIs, and kind of what are they? What are the location APIs? How good are they? How precise are they? And how kind of do they differentiate from GPS or whatnot?
Yeah, perhaps I can answer this because it's more technical. We have started with the location verification because that's an easier one. We don't give the location out. It's just a yes or no which comes back, and it's easier to negotiate it with the regulation. So we have started with that, but we are also working on a next one, which is called the retrieval, where we want to give out the location, but it's only a raw location. So it's not the exact, but only raw for data privacy reasons. And we are working also on a third one, which is a geofencing API. And that's actually exactly this use case from the logistic company that you can get a notification if a device is reaching a certain geographic point. So that are the three APIs mainly, which are in progress now, but happy to get more ideas. Just join Kamara in this sub-project, bring it in, open an issue, and work together with us on it.
And is there like one of the comments that is common is some of these capabilities exist for an app, at least on the mobile phone. You can ask your Android or iOS about location, which you get through GPS signal. What is the difference? Is there any difference? Is it more trustworthy? Is it less? I know faking GPS is possible. Is this kind of the benefit that these telcos APIs are bringing?
It is called GPS spoofing. So you can can really change the location via GPS spoofing on the device. And that's possible on iOS and on Android, but you can't change it from the network. The network is true. That's the difference.
So it's much more trustworthy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, a few questions here on quality on demand. So for quality on demand APIs, we're using if you're inside the home and using Wi-Fi, what are these quality on demand APIs for Wi-Fi? Because they are quite different than the 5G ones.
Yeah, they are completely different. The 5G one are addressing the core, the PCF, and the PCRF in the 4G core. The home Wi-Fi one are communicating with the home router to get a better connection there. So they are completely different. Also, the implementation is different in the moment. So in the home Wi-Fi, we can only prioritize a device, a complete device, and not distinguish between the application, at least in the moment. The other ones in the mobile network, they are capable to have the device and an application, so a port on the device to prioritize. And that is helpful, for example, if you have a remote controlled car. It's good to have the controls on a prioritized thing and having all the entertainment stuff like the Netflix, which the kids are looking in the car in a normal traffic. So for that, it really makes sense to have a distinction.
Is it fair to say that quality on demand tries to be a abstraction, right? So kind of some of the goal is for the developer or end user not having to know these kind of things. That on Wi-Fi it's WMM and on 5G something else, right? But being this abstraction which works across the network.
Yeah, that is exactly the reason why we have started with Camara, because we want to have this abstraction, we want to have these intent-based APIs, and a user, like a person who plays a game, they don't want to bother about all the technical stuff behind. They want to simply come to us and tell us, look, I'm in my game, I want to be faster as the others, please give me the lowest latency you can in the next quarter of hour because I want to have the next level. So, and this is the ask of the end user, and how we translate it, it's on our topic, and it's also independent of the technology behind. So we have in the moment we are focusing on the RAN optimization because that is the biggest way where we lose latency. That is 65% of the whole thing. So we focused on that, and we have solved it in 4G. We have solved it in 5G standalone already, but we are continue working on it. We are in contact with Qualcomm to get APIs on the devices to optimize the latency on the device. We are doing the traffic influence, so checking where is the best place to bring the telco data to the internet so that we don't lose too much time in the fixed line infrastructure. We are including this home quality and demand and putting it all together, then it gives the lowest latency to the end user. But he does not see it. He only gets an answer, yes, we have done it, and you got an improvement on level 6 of 10, for example.
Yeah, good question. So what is the relationship between the service exposure layer and 3GPP's SCEF? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's depending on your network topology. We on our side, we try to have also this transformation function from the southbound 3GPP level, so mainly the 5G core NEF, to the Camara API, the abstracted API within one component of the service exposure platform, that we have it on one central point because we want also to serve our NAT cores, and we want to avoid that we have to implement it in all the countries. So we do it once and then connect it via the standardized 3GPP interfaces to the cores of the different countries.
Another question regarding MVNOs. So will they, I mean, maybe it's a question for your Deutsche Telekom and Verizon hat, maybe it's a question for the Kamara hat. But will the APIs work for MVNOs? Or will they not? What is the plan? Because this will be relevant in many, especially B2B use cases.
Yeah. So it's really key that these APIs also work in the MVNOs. So if you look on these fraud APIs, at least for Germany, we have a clear signal that the banking companies only use it if you have a coverage of minimum 70% in the country. 70% network coverage. So if we add up the parts of Telefonica, Vodafone, and Deutsche Telekom, so only the MNOs, we come to around of 50%. So it's very clear we need the MVNOs to get enough coverage in the country. And I personally, I'm stating we don't need 70%, we need 95%. So it's really a key thing. We are currently working on it. So now I'm speaking only for Deutsche Telekom. We have had a look on it. From a technical point, that's the most easy part to activate these APIs. It gets more interesting if you need commercial contracts. That could be longer negotiations, I think. And also a big point is this consent topic. Because we also need the consent then for the MVNOs, and that should be in a CI of the MVNO, and you have to consider that people can give consent on your side and the MVNO side. So it's a little bit more complex, but we have to work on it and solve it because we need the coverage.
Last question before we move on to Jill's talk. So there are already a lot of network APIs on like the SD-WAN side, the backbone side, network as a service side. Kamara has in the headline telco APIs, right? So is telco really the right word, or it should be more like network APIs? What is the scope? Will it only be for telcos? Can it be other network as well?
So the scope of Kamara is telco APIs, mobile networks, fixed line networks, IT, any kind of APIs which are helpful for our customers. That is the scope of Kamara. If we identify an overlap with existing ones, then happy to have conversations that we avoid double work on that. We don't want to tap on anybody's toe. So if we identify some overlap, then we work on it.
But you define say a cable operator within the telco scope, right?
Yeah, so for example, we have Cable Labs also in Kamara working with us. That's an easy answer.
Also in the US, a lot of those are MVNOs as well.
Okay, I think we went way over time. So I will introduce Jill now, who will do the next part of the Kamara project introduction. Jill, are you there?
I'm here. Hello, everyone. My name is Jill Lovato. I work for the Linux Foundation. I manage outreach and marketing communications for Kamara and a handful of other projects. And so today I'm going to talk to you, give you some more information about Kamara. I'll try not to make it too duplicative. So we're going to start here. Let me just put this in show mode. Sorry, I'm used to working with Google Slides.
What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to put it in presentation mode.
I'm also a Google Slides person, so I think we need someone else who can help you.
What do I
Jill, the
press?
bottom right. Actually, I don't know if you have it enabled.
There we go. Thank you. All right, so some of this, as I said, is going to be a little bit duplicative, but I just wanted to drill in a little bit more detail on our scope. So basically what Kamara itself does is we collect these API requirements from GSMA and other related sources. And once we collect them, we define them, and we only define service APIs and service management APIs. And I'll get into a little bit of the differences there on the next slide. Maybe information most of you are already familiar with, but we want to make sure that we cover off on the basics here. Once we have those, working to define those, we're creating test plans, we're creating cases and tools from the consumer perspective. And once we have those together, we develop and test these APIs with the goal of creating developer-friendly documentation. So we have all of these tests and this tooling together, and then we have the documentation laid out for developers so they can easily consume those APIs. And in a nutshell, our overall deliverables basically are definitions and documentations of those service and service management APIs, working on the code there, and then of course testing and planning and delivering these deployment packages, as we just mentioned. We do have all of this information laid out in our GitHub repository. It's that link there at the bottom, and we will be sharing these slides after the presentation. I know somebody had asked that earlier on in the chat window. So this is just a little bit of a visual of what our scope is. And so Marcus and Alicia, we just mentioned that we focus on telco APIs. So that means APIs of cellular and fixed networks. Those can also be on the edge and the cloud through the telcos. And that means we're working on just the northbound interface here. If we're talking about east-west, that's going to be TM Forum. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So those are out of scope. So we're just talking about these up here in the northbound. Here's another visual. So I mentioned service API, service management APIs. So the service APIs are those intended for the end consumers and the developers. They're integrated by developers to kind of play up certain capabilities like quality on demand, SIM swap, some of the examples that Marcus has shared earlier. And then the service management APIs, they're intended for the end consumers, the developers to manage, to get data about the service APIs, check service availability, performance information, that sort of thing. And we did mention the operate APIs. Those again are out of scope for Kamara. TM Forum sort of manages that, and that's more in the channel partner purpose of service fulfillment and provisioning. So again, service APIs and service management APIs. So we are up here and right here. Here's just another kind of look at the entire ecosystem. I know Marcus and Alicia covered off on some of this. I won't talk through this entire diagram, but again, we're right here in this layer underneath the third-party marketplace and on top of TM Forum and GSMA. We define these APIs. TM Forum develops the operate API. So the APIs we're defining, again, are the service and the service management. There are a lot of SDOs that are covering different technology domains. And, you know, some of that is mentioned down here. So we do work closely with those, but they're playing a different role than we are. We've actually outlined all of this and what this whole ecosystem looks like in a white paper that we published some months back about the entire NAS ecosystem. There's a link to it here. You can find it on our website. I believe it's probably published on the TM Forum site as well. But again, we'll share the slides. So if anyone wants to see what that looks like in more detail, it's all outlined in that white paper. And so moving on a little bit, I want to talk about, and Alicia and Marcus kind of touched on this as well, why we want to make these resources available. What is the benefit for everybody, for operators, for developers? At the end of the day, it's to make it easier for customers. and make it easier for developers to take those APIs and make them accessible and make them work across countries and across networks. And then, of course, when everyone's working together and we're working in the same space, it makes technology innovation happen a lot faster, and that can speed time to deployment and adoption from a commercial perspective. So just making it easier for everybody, making it easier for the developers, for the aggregators to pull these down and implement them into the market, it just simplifies the process and helps revenue streams come faster. So a little bit of history. I know this was touched on as well. We did launch Kamara at Mobile World Congress Barcelona in 2022 with a total of 22 launch partners, and their logos are here. It was a joint effort between the GSMA and the Linux Foundation. Just the idea to standardize these developer-facing APIs, and so that's what we're doing. And now, as Alicia mentioned, the project is hosted under the Linux Foundation. So the Linux Foundation manages the governance and kind of plays the role of being that neutral home where all of these different players can come together and work collaboratively in a neutral environment. And where are we now? We now, as of today, we have 104 named partners. There are over almost 370 companies that are participating in Kamara in some way. We have 27 active APIs in development with 5 different sub-project working groups. There's over 1,000 people that are working on Kamara, and we've really established ourselves as the development home for GSMA's Open Gateway. And here's just a look at all of our logos of everyone who's participating in some way. So we're really excited about the interest in the project, and we're really eager that there are so many people on the call today. So where are we going next? Well, we're wanting to grow our API catalog and our roadmap, and sync across different service providers, bring in more aggregators and hyperscalers to make these available to an even broader audience. We also want to make sure that our lifecycle management is consistent and that we have good documentation. And then we want to continue support through GSMA, OAM, TM Forum, and other organizations so that we can make everything that we're doing available and beneficial to the market at large. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some more of the benefits for operators. I know this was also touched on earlier in the presentation. But I'm thinking this is more from why you should join, some other additional benefits aside from what's been touched on before. Collaborative innovation. I mean, we're working in open source here, so that means that you're getting the brain power and the brain trust of other organizations across the industry, and working in standards is going to contribute to development. It's going to make things easier for everybody. And make things more interoperable, which is what we're trying to do with Kamara. You can reap the technological advancements. You can benefit from other organizations' R&D to a point that they're sharing with the industry at large. It's going to help your business grow. There's a lot of potential here for new revenue streams, and also the market positioning that you get by being associated with Kamara and the GSMA initiative is also, huge. And you can make friends and extend your network. You're going to have access to a lot of other organizations across the globe, people that maybe you wouldn't normally associate with in a collaborative fashion. We've got a lot of competitors that work together, and it's really nice to see people that would normally maybe not share information work together in a really open fashion. And then at the end of the day, we talked about customer satisfaction. We're trying to make things easier for customers, and that's going to help with revenue and also prepare everyone for the future. And then, of course, alignment with SDOs. Cost efficiency we talked about. Again, the shared resources, the benefits from collective research, and then bringing in your own requirements into what everybody's doing. So those are just some benefits kind of at a glance. And now I want to talk a little bit about additional benefits of joining Kamara as a sponsor or as a member. And this is we have some information, some links to more information about this in some following slides. But basically, if those who join as a member, as a sponsor, depending on what level you join at, you could have a seat on the Kamara's governing board, which allows you to have some stronger influence over the strategy of the project. Being part of Kamara's, being part of the Linux Foundation, you get discounts on events and other programs like training. There's some brand elevation there. Signaling support for the open API development in a stronger way than just putting your logo up. It allows you that platform to showcase your own thought leadership. And really, at the end of the day, it helps ensure that the project governance and infrastructure continues. As much as we love doing what we're doing, we do need monetary support to make sure that we can continue doing what we're doing here from a Kamara standpoint. So how do you participate? Well, the first step, I think, would be to visit our website. We have a contact form here. This is a kind of a screen grab of what that looks like. There's a lot of links to resources on this page. You can join our mailing list. There's links to emails. If you browse our GitHub repository, there's all kinds of information, documentation on each of the APIs. All of our calls are open to the public. So there's working groups for each of the APIs. So if you're interested in a particular API, you can join that mailing list, just show up to the calls and just start participating. We also have a lot of publications that we've produced as a project, and several from organizations that talk about how they're using their APIs. That's listed on our website as well, so you can just peruse that. You can attend events. We're actually going to be on site at Open Source Summit in September. That's in Vienna. We're going to have a booth there. So anyone in the area who's planning to come, you can stop by and talk to us there in person. And then, of course, fill out this contact form, and then you'll be added to our mailing list and get additional information. And here's some additional links and ways to join. There's a QR code there you can scan. This would be the section most of our operators would be interested in. Here's a direct link. If you would like your logo displayed on our website as a participating organization. If you want to join as a member, click this enrollment link here. Again, the cost kind of depends on what level you want to join at and how big the organization is. Sorry, we also have an associate membership option as well for nonprofit organizations. So that is the end of my presentation. We can go ahead and open it up to Q&A.
That's perfect. So we haven't gotten any like specific questions on how to join Kamara project. I think.
Well,
you made it
I
very
answered mine.
If we can also open up, but if there's additional questions from the previous presentation, we can certainly use the time there. We want to use the time in the way that folks, what's going to be most valuable to our audience. So I'd invite Alicia and Marcus to pipe in if there's other unanswered questions.
There is a lot of unanswered questions, so I'll just keep asking them. And
there was actually one question, real quick. There's one question on: do you have to be affiliated with an organization or academia to participate in Kamara? And I answered this in writing, but I just wanted to call it out. The answer is no, you don't. You can join all the same resources that Jill just reviewed, and how to get in touch and how to join are all still relevant.
Yep, individual contributors are always welcome.
Perfect. Okay, I'll just keep asking the questions that pops up, and again from the audience, just keep asking questions, and we will try to answer them all. So I got one question here on the wireline or fixed broadband / Wi-Fi. Do the Kamara APIs eliminate the need for broadband from TR69 and TR369 APIs? Is there any work on integrating them? And Marcus, if you don't know the answer, I can answer for you. I'll give it to you.
Unfortunately, I don't know it. So I think it's one of the things where we have to align, where we have to take contacts and see what's there and how all the existing things fit together, that we can provide one solution for the industry, for our customers.
So I can add a bit to that because I used to do a lot of work for Broadband Forum, and I've been very involved with the Broadband Forum TR69 and 369. So these are kind of different types of APIs. So Broadband Forum's TR69 and 369 is mostly concerned about things like firmware upgrades, monitoring Wi-Fi, and whatnot for home broadband routers. And there will be alignment between Kamara and Broadband Forum. And I know some operators are already working on using Kamara APIs, for example, QoD APIs, to leverage Broadband Forum APIs to actually execute quality on demand on home Wi-Fi routers.
Great, Magnus. Can we hire you as an outreach evangelist for Kamara?
Sure, I'm trying. Okay. Okay. If MVNOs or fixed lines will be covered by different Kamara APIs, do you think, or will all of these APIs, will the pricing be unique?
So pricing is up to the MNOs and MVNOs. Due to antitrust, we are not allowed to align on that. It's driven by the market. And we from Kamara, we have decided that all the commercial and pricing stuff is out of scope for that. So that's a very clear answer. And where we should also be very careful what's allowed, what we can discuss and whatnot.
You can discuss, but you can't collude, right?
Yeah.
Cannot discuss either. That's yeah.
Okay, you cannot discuss nor collude. Regulators, they make everything difficult, right? Okay, so there's a question here on the API economy size. So I guess this is more personal opinion. Any insight on what is the business strategy?
So let me start with this one. So there's a ton of syndicated research houses that have published a lot of different sizes. So for example, one of them says it's going to be $34 billion by 2030 globally. McKinsey says it's $300 billion by 2030 globally. Obviously, it's a really wide range. The key difference is that McKinsey size includes pull through of core connectivity services. So the idea is that kind of as I mentioned, these APIs should increase usage of telco network services or telco networks themselves. So there should be additional core revenue beyond just the price for the APIs themselves. So there's a really wide range. I think 34 is more or less what the average is coming to by 2030 globally. The business strategy, I kind of alluded to it or talked about it briefly, but it's really that we're monetizing existing assets, right? We already have telco networks. They're all actually quite intelligent, even though sometimes we may be referred to as a dumb pipe. There's nothing dumb about these pipes at all. But now we're actually allowing access to this network intelligence in this really simple API format. Some of the APIs will be monetized directly. So like number verify, SIM swap, the first two, these are going to be per call, right? You're going to pay a per call fee. But others, for example, we have one called Edge Discovery Service. It allows you to discover the closest wavelength zone to the end user. That one Verizon is offering for free because we want you to use wavelength zone, and that's where we actually earn our money. So you can think about it in the same way that you think about cloud APIs. Some of them you pay for, some of them are given as part of the service because they help you utilize that underlying service. So the logic is going to be pretty similar across both of these areas, but I think we're all thinking that it's going to be a fairly large market, and it's going to also pull through core connectivity.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll just keep asking questions then. What segments of the network do Kamara APIs concern? Is it only the user equipment interactions, or can you interact with higher layers like OSS and BSS?
So
that make
we want to
sense?
serve the telco APIs. For that, we want to have all the segments in. That's the clear answer. In the moment, we are looking more towards what is a user device or what is an IoT device, because that are all in a lot of companies that are two different worlds, also in our company, and we are working to enable these APIs on both sides.
Perfect. What is the current biggest issues and challenges for MNOs and MVNOs for developing and monetizing network APIs? And maybe
Probably I
everyone
go
should
first.
answer that.
Yeah. I go first. So I think we have solved this standardization thing of the APIs. Kamara is established. We have a really great success, growth. So that's there. Also the standardization of the distribution channels via Open Gateway, that's there. We have now to find the companies who are doing the aggregation. That is one of the challenges which we have now. For that, we appreciate to have the local champion initiatives. You can ask Henry later on that. In addition, the more bigger point which I see is exactly this discussion with the regulation authorities of the countries. Because the situation is different from country to country, and the laws are not very clear. And we had the first experience, for example, with Number Verify. It was easy to bring it into the market in Brazil. It was also easy to bring it into market into Spain. In Germany, it's a real mess. I think Germany is the most regulated country on this planet, and we are still in discussions here. So this situation is very different from country to country, from API to API, and we have to get into the discussions with the authorities to find the right balance between data privacy, network neutrality on the one side, and the usability and the benefit of the APIs on the other side, for the benefit for the end customer. And that's also a challenge which we now have to solve. My personal view.
Alicia, you want to go?
I think I would echo a lot of what Marcus said. I think also one of the key challenges is kind of operating in ambiguity. This is, like we've all been saying this morning, this is all, or morning for me, this is all very new for telcos. We don't know what the market size is going to be. We don't know, we have an idea of what the distribution channels are, but we don't know who's going to buy from those distribution channels. So there's a lot of experimentation that's ongoing. And I think just operating in ambiguity as an industry that tends to be very, very risk averse, I think is kind of a pervasive one, in addition to the ones that Marcus mentioned.
Perfect. Jill, do you have anything to add?
I also think Henry should answer this question when it's his turn.
It's a perfect segue because Henry is about 2 minutes away from starting before we are officially on his time. So Jill, if you have like 1 minute and 30 seconds, we're perfect.
No, I actually don't have anything to add. I think Alicia and Marcus did a really great job of covering off on that.
So we just have to be quiet for now.
Just watch the clock tick.
Okay, but no, I won't be that strict with the clock. So Henry, can you hear us? Have you joined us? So introducing.
I've been here all the time.
Yeah,
How you doing, Magnus? How you doing, everyone?
You want to introduce yourself and then do the question.
So I'm Henry Calvert. My normal day job is head of networks at the GSMA, looking at the transitional and generational changes of the mobile industry. I've been with the GSMA for about 10 years. I'm also the initiative lead for Open Gateway. So very glad to actually be here and in support of Kamara and also the TM Forum in this initiative that we're trying to do.
Perfect. And then I'll ask the first question that you were kindly given from your Kamara friends. What do you see as the biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge is standardization first of all. I think developers, we don't understand the developer requirements in full. So I use the term, at the moment, the industry is still very much inside out. We will build it and they will come. We've got to take an outside in viewpoint of the world. What are the pain points that the developers or enterprises have? And how do we actually fulfill that? It might be technology and capabilities that can be exposed through APIs that exist today, or it could be capabilities that don't exist today. And we need to think about, as an industry, how to standardize that and actually deliver to it. We need to take the competitive edge out of the operators. These are services. I'm not talking about IoT businesses. Operators can go and have direct relationship with enterprises and create value there, for sure. Private networks, as an example of that. This is about how do we get ubiquitous coverage so we can solve problems like fraud. A bank does not distinguish between its customers between mobile networks. Their customers are on all mobile networks. If we're going to solve fraud for the banks consistently, it's, market by market, the banking associations there adopting APIs that have been exposed by every single operator, every single MVNO, whether they're a heavy MVNO or a light MVNO. We have to get to that point because that's sort of the expectations. Developers don't want to play with 30% market share. They want to play with over 80%, if not 100% market share of the endpoints. We talk from a mobile point of view, but it's just the same for a fixed endpoints, and it's the same for satellite endpoints when they eventually come in the future. So I think the big challenge is really the collaboration, working together to ensure that we're working to a standard. And I'm sure the value will actually come out of just those two very brief use cases that I've just given there.
Perfect. And then perfect follow-up question, how is the GSMA and Open Gateway working on ensuring this global adoption of Kamara APIs and any TM Forum similar APIs?
Yeah, I'm a great believer about let's try not to duplicate. So I think Jill showed the sort of white paper that we've come to about here are the roles and the responsibilities. From the GSMA's point of view, Alicia also said, with the sort of the commercialization arm, does it financially make sense? And how do you economically scale that across the industry? So our role and responsibility is obviously to drive the mobile ecosystem and industry in that direction. We take it from a technical aspect. You've seen the northbound interfaces are provided by Kamara. You've seen the some of the east-west or the operate APIs as we bring channel partners into the marketplace done by TM Forum. From a GSMA, our technical remit is Telco Finder, interoperability and federation. How does a developer discover which APIs are commercially launched by which operators? And then how do they get the understanding of the initial credentials and get in touch and start using that for, from the operators or even the aggregators, channel partners, as we call them today. So we've got an important role to make sure that we can signpost to everyone what that interoperability and federation do. And the routing that goes in with that, if the developer has the mobile number or the IP address because they have an app on the phone, how do they route that? How do they discover where that is and how do they route that across the network? That's what Telco Finder is. So that's the technical sort of thing that we are providing into that. We then have to look at the commercial sort of side. The commercial sort of side is there needs to be standard terms and conditions or service level agreements. If we can get to similar pricing models, then it's good. I'm not talking about the price here. I'm just talking about whether it's rated, not rated, whether it's volume based, whether it's transactional based, etc. So we have to get to those sort of principles on the northbound interfaces. I'm just going to pop some links in the chat as well for everyone. That document exists. It's called the Open Northbound Service Level Agreement, something like that. There's a link there. You can all read it. And we are trying to get operators and channel partners to actually develop that. I've mentioned channel partners. I think they're desperately important in the industry. Then do the aggregation point, either from a marketplace or a reseller point of view. This is the likes of AWS, Azure, Google, Cinch, Twilio, Infobit, Ericsson, Vonage, Nokia. I have to name everyone, otherwise I get telephone calls and they say you haven't named us. So I try and name
I think
everyone.
you can mention Willab and Shabudi as well. 'Cause
Okay,
they
yeah,
speak
sorry,
later.
yeah, exactly. Very good, very good. Yeah, my embarrassment. But you know, how does we've got the channel partner onboarding document, which brings the commercial integration, the business integration, and the technical integration between operators. So it's standardized from operators. It's also standardized southbound from these aggregation points. That's very important. And what we do in assistance of not only the SLAs, but back in the technical thing, we're trying to do the certification. We've not seen a Kamara API come out yet that is standard, that meets the testing regime that we actually do. So everyone has to be, brought to the level of standardization. That will be the same for the channel partners as well, to make sure the supply side of the ecosystem is working. And then we look at the policy and regulation. Marcus has mentioned it a few times. Privacy, consent, net neutrality, they're all big topics. We're all fairly scared of them as operators and the ecosystem about it as well. But this is about sharing use cases and understanding about what's actually happening on those policy and regulators. I get called in by quite a few regulators around the world, trying to explain that what we're trying to do is provide a ubiquitous solution for developers to be able to access information that's going to better provide their services. As soon as I start talking to them about it, they go, brilliant, great. But still, there are privacy laws that need to be managed and discussed. So we discuss them at that level and try and bring some solutions. So it's not just only a little bit of the technical that we're trying to support. We want to promote everything as well. So my last statement is, of course, we use our outreach platform. You all know our outreach platform. I hope that's Mobile World Congresses, it's M360s. But we're also turning up at 48 external events this year with evangelists like Mark, like Alicia, like T-Mobile as well out of the US. We've just been at MS Build. We've been at Google Google Developers. We're going to API Days. We're coming to events like this. So you'll see us around the place. So we've got to start to educate that ability. There's a couple of questions out there as well, if I may say so, just basically saying, what is the commercialization at the moment? And the commercialization, as we see it, is 111 instances of Kamara-based APIs have been commercialized. 82 of them are going through certification at the moment. I think we certified 34 of them. So it's starting to grow from that sense. That's been delivered by 46 networks around 24 markets in the world. And what we've also done from the GSMA, this is our role, is we've also looked at market champions. That's taking markets and aligning the APIs, aligning the principles, aligning which sectors they're looking at and which use cases they're looking at, aligning that and commercially launching all at the same time. So a developer knows whether they go to Infobip in Brazil for fraud, for example, or they go to Axiata in Sri Lanka for one-time passwords. They know they're going to get a ubiquitous and the same sort of thing. And at that point, we challenge all the commercial principles. We challenge the regulation as well at that point. So we go market by market. There are 8 markets that have aligned all their APIs and commercially launched out there at the moment. This is phenomenal. This is in 18 months. In fact, the market commitment sort of stuff or champion stuff is probably less than a year old still. I think it was June last year, actually, we started it. So the speed by which this is actually starting to happen, which is a platform by which the developers can have this trusted environment. We need more operators to launch. We need more use cases to launch or API groups to launch to actually start to fulfill more value in the industry. And we hope at Barcelona 2025 to actually talk about that value that the operators are actually starting to create in the marketplace. There you go. I haven't done this before, Magnus. There's the script coming out very quickly.
Yeah, you don't need any slides. I'll just start asking questions, and you can take them. And I guess if Marcus and Alicia and Jill is still here, if they want to chip in, feel free to do. So the first question, I think you kind of answered it, but I'll ask
I
it
can
again.
repeat.
So is fragmentation a potential issue?
Yeah,
And-
all our initiatives previously have fragmented, whether it was one API, whether it's Mobile Connect. They all do the same job, but they don't do the same job consistently to the standard. One of the failings we had in Mobile Connect, and I'm quite happy to talk about the lessons learned, was we wrote specification documents and people interpreted them differently. SimSwap, not only had yes/no responses, had Boolean responses, it had 1-0 responses, which just drives developers mad. Also, the security and credentials mechanisms are all different from every single operator, and therefore you have to build, as a developer, you have to build 3 instances just to address Spain. Which is costly. It is very costly in store and compute and the models you put in. So yeah, to reduce the fragmentation from the operators and to reduce the fragmentation from the channel partners is critical for the success of this. And that is why we're putting significant effort around the certification, not only from the operators, but also southbound from the channel partners as well. If we can get that bit right, there's probably a chance channel partners can sell, differentiated services, differentiated products, differentiated APIs out there in the marketplace, which would be great because that will create value.
Perfect. Yeah, and then another follow-up question on these. So terms and conditions and the fragmentation of those might be a complete deal breaker, right? If I'm a developer at an enterprise, I go in and I see, I don't know how many MNOs there are, but say I have to approve 200 different terms and conditions. That I can't do that, right? And I have to send it to some legal team, and that will take a year to review, right? So how are you working on this, and what's your approach there?
The 2 sides of that is I've mentioned the channel partner onboarding. I've mentioned the northbound open service level agreements. That tries to bring a level of consistency, but everyone have got their little T's and C's that they need to squeeze in. And the channel partners are really important here because they're an aggregation point. So hopefully we can take some of the friction from the developers in the channel partner role. So very much sort of key on that. When we're working from a market champion's point of view, that we've got the 3 or 4 operators in a market together, that's one of the questions we actually asked. Please try and keep the SLAs consistent. Now, there is a generic, an inherent problem. Every network is built differently. Okay, they're not all the same. If they're all the same, it'd be pretty boring as well. But they are all different. They provide different coverages. They provide different service levels out there. So we do try and we're just trying to harness the fact that that there is a standard framework by which the SLAs could be provided, and consistency is market. We were talking about pricing before, and we're not allowed to talk about pricing, but we are allowed to talk about pricing that is public and is out there in the marketplace. So we need more operators to publicly announce what their pricing is and what their terms and conditions are, because then we can talk about them and then we can align them. And there's a lot too much about it still held behind garden walls by operators. We need to be bold and get out there with those terms and conditions, because we've got the forums to have the discussion to take it forward. WOZ has been around for 35 years, the wholesale agreements and solutions teams in GSMA. Has every single operator around the world participating in that. Needs to move on from roaming. It does do interoperability agreements, interconnect agreements. But if we can get people to be in those forums, the operators to be in the forums, say, this is how we're approaching it in the market, then we have a chance at getting a level of standardization across those commercial principles ready and going. And we're not just the operator groups in these sort of things. Ericsson, Vonage is involved, Azure's involved, AWS is involved, Infobip's involved. It's the whole ecosystem moving forward.
Perfect. I'll keep asking questions. So we discussed here open APIs. Is there a case for non-open APIs, like vendors may have their own APIs, operators may have their own APIs, they may have internal APIs. How does this fit in, or doesn't it fit in?
Well, that's why we love Kamara, because Kamara is an open contribution model through the Linux Foundation. That's why it's got to work through the Linux Foundation and how they set the things. If you want to contribute that API and you feel it's important and other operators feel important, what the GSMA is doing from that point of view, we're not trying to get involved in that technology, that technical sort of side, but we will prioritize it and we will talk about it. I have a heat map of every at the moment. It's a heat map of 14 APIs because that's what effectively is commercial out there. Anti-fraud is the hottest around the world. But part of my job in my team is to actually go around to make sure other operators and other networks know that these exist, what the use cases are, what's the value that can be created, exactly what Marcus and Jill were talking about as well, and cover that heat map so we can actually see it getting deeper red, with more people actually using these APIs. So yeah, bring them to Kamara. That's what they're there for. Contribute those codes, whether non-open or open. I'm sure the Linux Foundation can talk about the licensing regime. At the moment, it's Apache because we think that's worked both in the code and the documentation. Everyone wants to support that because it's clear, it's simple. There's no hanging ties on there. And if operators, think if we see that there's value in it, then we can prioritize that and actually drive it through the adoption of the operators. People don't know about these things. That's one of the problems. So yeah, always open to have a discussion in the GSMA about the API at a product level. But if you really want it to sing, get it in Kamara, contribute it into Kamara and the effort behind that.
So what do you mean by commercialization? Is that commercially available APIs, or is someone paying, or what is your definition?
Well, as we've mentioned before, there are different pricing models, and there are indirect APIs which probably don't have a pricing. I mean, for example, I'm just gonna state this. Simple edge discovery. There's probably the service fee is going to be the use of the edge, not the discovery of the edge. So it's a little bit eccentrical sort of question to answer. Commercialization to me is an operator has released it and it can be consumed by a channel partner, or it can be consumed directly from a developer, regardless of a zero tariff is a pricing regime. Okay, so it just needs to be available and people can actually use it. We need more sandpits and sandboxes out there so developers can have a go. The developer mindset is to try before buy, or try before and see what they can mash up and see what they can do. We need more operators and channel partners to provide those sandboxes so developers can be innovative. We're doing hackathons at the moment as well. We've just done one out in Mobile World Congress Shanghai with China Telecom leading it. There was 69 different entries of different ways of matching up the Kamara-based APIs. But the one that won was to stop unfair access to tickets by ticket bots and ticket touts. We've all had the Taylor Swift problem at this point in time when none of us can get tickets because the ticket box are buying them all. Well, they've worked out how to have a fair ticketing system and to evaluate where the bots are coming from and to validate on using SIM swap or number verification, etc. And device location in actually solving that. So the more that we have that open developer sandbox environment, the more the ideas that are going to come, and then the value-based pricing will come in the future. I mean, everyone talks about the total cost. That's the carrot. The stick at the moment is let's see people developing these things and these solutions to see what value is actually creating. The banks are solving fraud left, right, and center. There's a huge amount of value in that, and therefore the pricing probably needs to reflect the value it's actually saving over time.
Yeah, if you can save the Taylor Swift problem, then I think that's 300 billion right there. So don't worry about it. And
we've got a breakdown of all these figures, and there's a bit of a misconception in the fact that the value that is actually stated there is 3 components. 10 to 15%, it could be API transactional revenue. But the next 70% is ARPU uplift, whether that's on an enterprise basis or the consumer basis. We see AT&T go out with quality on demand boost for gaming. So, you know, the subscriber can boost up. We've just done a case study from China Telecom on how much that boost bust actually improves the latency that gamers are using and video subscribers are using, and they've created value out of the back of that. So, you know, 70% is coming from that. And the other 10, 15% is actually coming from additional services like infrastructure as a service, edge compute, and other side-based services that your operators may have. So, yeah, it's a big picture. You need to see it broken down by sector. You need to see it broken down by value. Everyone knows it's the McKinsey stuff that we use, so you know it's out there. But there is some insights into it. Question is, can we meet those opportunities? Are the operators keen enough to actually go and you know, sort of consume, be part of the digital infrastructure revolution? You know, I think it might be threefold growth in the digital infrastructure revolution. When I look at telecommunications, we're not going to see threefold growth over the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, and it sounds like it might be underreported if the specific Taylor Swift revenue is not reported.
I wouldn't want to say that, Magnus. I wouldn't want to say that at all. The opportunity's there. It's whether we can come together as communities to and collaboration to actually start creating and building that value.
Yeah, so follow-up question. So what is the adoption by developers now? What do you see? What do you see from the inside? Is the adoption of the developers and isn't currently more on like very hyper-specific use cases? So
you know, my 3-year plan has been, you know, first year was to get operators understanding and get operators collaborating. And Kamara and TM Forum have done a sterling job at that as well, and long live that happens. This year is all about channel partners, getting channel partners, because that's a route to market. That's the go-to-market principles, and also the market champions. So we've got a consistent platform and supply platform out there for the industry. Next year, tomorrow, very much the demand side. So you know, and I said we measure somewhat, you know, how many times Open Gateway has been mentioned out there. We're currently at nearly 13,000. I think it's 12,500 media mentions of Open Gateway and Kamara and the whole system. So, which is quite loud sound of voice, but that's only in our industry. We've got to start talking to the developers so they understand what it is, because we can articulate. You've just heard today brilliantly. We can articulate the use cases. We can articulate how it's happening. We now need to understand the voice of the developers. Now, I don't think it's a sales job going out to sell to the developers. I think we've got to do this outside-in approach. So in 2025, for me, it's understanding the requirements of the developers, getting them to have a seat at the table in Kamara, a seat at the table in TM Forum, a seat at the table in GSMA, and basically say, these are what we need because these are the problems we're trying to solve. Yeah, we got here. Twilio claims more than 10 million developers. Yeah, they've created an ecosystem as well out there. If we look at Brazil, just to add, there were, I think, Claro published that the SIM-swap API in the first quarter of the year was used 3 million times. They expect that to grow 3 million in the month of March. They expect that to grow to 10 million transactions by the middle of this year. I probably need to clarify that with them. But the value is being sort of created. I think if we try and measure this on scale today, we'll fail because everyone will go, that's not big enough. What we need to do is make sure that we're starting to learn how to talk to developers and start to listen to them, more importantly, and get their requirements and the APIs that they want to see coming through the networks. Now, that can either happen at a level 3 from the channel partners, where they map up Kamara APIs, and that's working with the channel partners. Okay, what are the things that need to be exposed from the network? So there's that sort of discussion going on.
Perfect. So yeah, you already said like Claro, that's very impressive. If they have 3 million API calls just in the month of March, That's a
Yeah,
huge.
SMS. Sorry, not SMS. It was SimSwap. Did I say SimSwap?
Yeah, SimSwap.
It's
Yeah,
the SimSwap
still.
API, Kamara-based SimSwap API.
That's very cool. Okay, so let me find some other questions. We have 5 more minutes before we have to kick off for the next speaker. So yeah, kind of similar question to what we had earlier. What kind of support does the GSMA have for MNOs and MNOs that when it comes to federation in specific countries or even regions?
So yeah, and we try and get this market champions that we've actually done in the regions. But Mark Cornell's actually on the call. He's my technical lead. You know, we provide certification sort of process on the APIs. We also will be providing a global telco finder or a global catalog discovery, which is, you know, sucking in quite a lot of TMF 931 APIs. We can educate all the operators on what they need to, where they need to go, how they need to actually see this, and make sure that they've got the right navigation to go where they need to go. We do that either from a local position or from a global position. But myself and Mark get in contact with us. I'll get you in touch with the different regions that we've got support in North America, we've got support in Latin America, we've got support in MENA, we've got support in Europe, we've got support in Southeast Asia, we've got support in Greater China. You get the picture. So, you know, we've got a lot of people out there that can actually support these questions and have active discussions. We just had this morning we had a Southeast Asia sort of check-in based from the steering group of, you know, the questions that the operators have got about enabling the APIs and what level of telco finder that we're actually going to be providing in the industry shortly.
Great. Because there's a kind of chicken and egg problem here where developers are waiting for want APIs to have 85, 95% coverage, right? And operator network telcos, whatever you like to call them, are waiting for proof that they can make money. And of course, you can't have proof before you have the 80, 90% and whatnot. So how do you work around this?
So we're starting to build the confidence with the operators to actually, you know, everyone's expecting a big bang, aren't they? Well, you know, it's not. It's going to be grow. Businesses grow over a certain period of time, and how you actually pull that through. You know, we didn't make $1 trillion in 1987, did we? It was, you know, a couple of $1 million. You know, in voice call, everyone thought, you know, voice calls are just going to be local. Why would anyone want to talk overseas or talk to people overseas as well? That's obviously fundamentally changed over the last 35 years in what we've learned, probably even longer if I do my maths properly. So yeah, Barcelona for us will be trying to make those statements of what's the value looking like, where it's actually coming from. We're still very much fintech based at the moment, so anti-fraud banks. You know, that's why I like the ticketing type thing, because we start to get into e-commerce, maybe retail. If you look across Spain and Germany, you know, the work Marcus has been doing with Vinted, getting onto online purchase security activities are good. You know, what can we do in the automotive industry? What can we do in the manufacturing industry? What can we do in the entertainment? The entertainment industry is the largest value sector that everyone looks at. Everyone thinks everyone's going to be looking at rock concerts through AR glasses. Maybe we'd enjoy the experience of actually being there as well. I'm sure Glastonbury would have been good if you could actually see the stage from a little bit further back if you're the last person in. But yeah, all this we've got to build the confidence in the industry. The GSMA board will be taking the action to actually say, no, yeah, we do see value. We do need to have prioritization and focus to actually drive more value segments. And I think, you know, that moss ball will grow. Once we actually see that there is value, we've got to have that carrot for the operators to be confident that they can launch. If we don't make it simple for the developer, it's quite simple for me. If it's not simple and frictionless for developers, it will fail. And that requires all this stuff that we talked about before.
Thanks. That was perfect. And I 100% agree. Like I've been a developer myself, and
yeah,
it made me lazy, because you always look for the simplest option. If and it has to work just immediately, make it easy. That's the kind of thing, right? Because as a developer, you have problem and you just want to fix it. And that's all you want to do, right?
I'm not
It's-
saying we have the answer yet either. So, you know, but I do you see everyone on this call. You'll hear from Kevin, you'll hear from the others, you know, very shortly. But I do believe there's a lot of passion from these people to actually get it right this time and drive forward. I've been in GSMA for 10 years, done a few projects like RCS, had fun around RCS as well. And I've not seen momentum like this ever before. It's a bit unusual. It's a bit eerie, you know, to actually see it. And I think it's because it's quite clear that everyone is wanting to work together in the industry. We all have our role, and we're acting it out. And you know, hopefully, the only way that you can fuel that is through value and revenue.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, Henry. And that's
My pleasure.
I think a perfect segue to our next speaker, who is Jeff. Jeff, are you there?
Yep, I'm here, Magnus.
Perfect. So, wasn't it a perfect segue? Because you will talk
It
about
was a
multiple
perfect.
problems,
It
right?
was a perfect segue. Can I share a few slides?
Of course.
Yeah. Here we go. And can everyone see the screen?
I can.
Yep. And it was a perfect segue. I do want to pick up. Henry always says some excellent things. I just want to highlight a couple of things. The first one being that I also want to take us on a little bit of an outside-in journey in this 15 minutes. That was the first thing that Henry set up very valuably. And the second part is that I have a Taylor Swift problem that I wasn't aware of, but now I'm fully aware that I have a Taylor Swift problem. I just don't know what it is yet, but that's causing me a certain amount of concern. Let me just introduce myself just for background. I currently work with marketing at Rakuten Symphony, and for people who aren't familiar, Rakuten's actually not a telecom company. It's a internet company. It's the Amazon of Japan. It has 70 different businesses, but it chose to build a mobile network, and it chose to build the mobile network completely in software. Everything's automated, fully cloud native, and it's really the catch line we have is learn how an internet company does telecom. And I work for the bit of Rakuten now that is promoting what we've done in Japan to try and help the rest of the industry become software first and software driven. And previous to that, I mean, it was great pleasure. I do want to acknowledge yourselves, Magnus, and the Dumas team. I think I did watch the previous sessions. I think you're doing a really good job in trying to keep this conversation very honest, which is what's required. I saw the original launch slide. I was one of the first people inside Mobile Ejects, which was one of the companies as part of the announcement, which was a Deutsche Telekom founded startup focusing on edge computing that got bought by Google. And prior to that, I worked for a long time in Ericsson, a great company who's tried to do this the multiple times before I've been involved with. I'm going to have flashbacks when Kevin speaks. I think I'll recognize some of the learnings. And just to close out this introduction, just because we haven't succeeded before doesn't mean we can't succeed now. The world looks very, very different. It is advantageous always to learn from what happened before and actually change the approach based on those learnings. So the reason Magnus asked me to quickly speak, I wrote an article. I am a developer at birth, and I did spend the weekend just trying to see what developing network slicing looked like. I know it's very early days, but I was interested to see what that experience felt like. I'm not going to go through this post. I mean, it's if you want to read through it, just look me up on LinkedIn. and we'll send this material out. There's the link to it. And also I've written some other things just around how we need to approach APIs as an industry. So I'm not going to focus on that at all. I'm going to focus on something that is a little bit more outward in. I'm going to focus on politics. Something completely different. And I think we should celebrate, not because of who won. It was the UK general election a week or so ago, I think, or last week. The fact that just democracy worked really well, and for 99% of the participation, it was very respectful and worked great. We all took part watching this online, myself from the US on BBC live broadcast, and they did something really interesting for the first time. It was completely new. They've never done it before. They filmed all 650 constituencies results live. And they did that by distributing a kit that consisted of a smartphone, a tripod, and preloaded applications. And what happened was that it allowed them to have a camera everywhere, and it allowed for every single, even the non-popular counts to be actually broadcast, and people were really enthusiastic about that. So the question that we ask ourselves is, how did they do that? Because this is something from the outside in that I think is very interesting for us to understand inside the operator community. That unlike what some of the survey says, developers aren't waiting for us to turn up with APIs. Developers aren't like that. Developers are actually trying to solve problems, either for themselves or for the companies they work for, and they're looking for the best solution. And the definition of best needs to have clarity around it. It's something that's easy to use. It's something that solves the problem. It's something they can try. It's something they can find. It always works, and it's affordable. And that's exactly the approach the BBC took by distributing basically this tube that you see on the left-hand side to all places. Now, we speak in telecom about wanting to reinvent the broadcasting industry and allow them to do things differently. I wanted to highlight this as something that is happening today, because this is what the market looks like that we're trying to deal with, at least in broadcasting, from a network, potentially network slice or quality on demand. So first off, all locations were given a tube with the tripod, pre-configured iPhone. It was like a Kia. You can set it up. It was like everyone just did it themselves. The second, for the signal, it was SIM card bonding to Wi-Fi at the venue. So at the application level, they bonded traffic over the local Wi-Fi, if it was available, and the local cellular network. The kit fit in the tube. It was incredibly easy to distribute and easy to manage. And also, just pointing out, a lot of these solutions have things that are very practical. The battery pack was only went down to 84% after nearly 7 hours of streaming, because it would have been really hard to find somewhere to charge it up. Also, this wasn't the only solution they had. They actually had something called from TVU that used cellular network bonding. That was a higher grade camera that had audio on it. So they combined these two device solutions to make a live broadcast at scale over 650 locations that normally they wouldn't do. And it worked. I was made a little mistake there. It's the app on the iPhone was TVU Anywhere. There's the link there. Then the other broadcast quality camera and cellular bonding was we're using LiveU units, which was the link there. And they're solving the problem using app-based bonding over networks. So when we look at trying to deliver quality to customers, I think it's a really good idea to see how people are trying to solve this problem today and how that looks. And the question we ask ourselves is this competition? Is this a potential customer? Would they like to know what the network quality is so they can adjust the performance of this solution? These are all good questions for us to be aware of. So to end, if we just go quickly through from my point of view, and we look at developers, developers are really, really clever. They solve problems in ways that we cannot imagine. They're solving problems in all kinds of different contexts. They're all different. There's a great need to actually understand where we are focusing and what the value is. And it's fine to be focused. So I think the example of fraud is a really good example because there's clear value and there's clear problems that we're solving. And fraud has something that's very common to elections. A lot of these problem statements are country bounded, not internationally bounded, which means that as operators, we need to collaborate to get 100% coverage at the country level. Because we've heard earlier, people won't adopt if it's partial coverage in a country even. But once you have complete coverage, then there's a huge number of business problems that are completely bounded at a country boundary level. The third bullet here is just pointing out how clever developers are to make things work. So I'm not sure we're aware of this, but virtual reality headsets actually predict head movement and generate 6 different images based on where you might go before you go. So they've reduced latency by predicting your head movement, and they throw 5 of them away. They're the kind of solutions that developers come up with and problem solving. And then 95%, I'm sorry, but 95% are not waiting for network APIs. That's what triggered me to write the original article. Then advice to network operators, ourselves, our industry. I mentioned this, we need to solve real problems, real opportunities, real value. Let's take the example of the BBC and doing their outside broadcast. They're now managing a fleet of 650 different outside cameras. Would it be helpful for them to actually have awareness of the quality of the networks that they're moving to and actually be able to manage that quality with some kind of predictable level? Not by guaranteeing performance, maybe, but by just having awareness of what the performance is so they can take decisions in their own applications and own solutions. The second bullet here for the operators, it's a great segue, as you were saying, Magnus, as a developer, we all know this. We're trying to solve a problem. We need to find a solution. We need to be able to try it. It's got to be simple. And the last part, that's not the National Basketball Association. That's the next best alternative. It's got to be better than the next best alternative because we're going to choose the best alternative. And the best alternative might just be the simplest one, the easiest one. If 2 solutions are at parity, it's going to be the cheaper one. And then the last bullet, I think, is something that I'm quite passionate about. And I think it comes into some of the comments we have around fraud. The data is more valuable than performance. The reality is to guarantee performance is very complicated unless you have a dedicated network, because we live in a world of multiple access networks, multiple backbones, multiple providers. But our industry have very interesting. It has very interesting awareness about the population at an individual level. And if we're clever about revealing that, but maintaining privacy and doing so in a trusted way, as we've said, I think the opportunities are absolutely enormous. I think what we need to do as an industry is focus on problems that are going to be large in 2030, not problems that we thought we had in 2015. And hopefully I've hit perfectly at 15 minutes, I think. So I will pause there. I'll stop.
Yes, you're very good on the timing. So I guess there's no time for questions, or actually we have one short question if you can keep it to like 30 seconds. So like UK elections is interesting, but shouldn't we all vote by mail? And maybe this is, or maybe vote by an app. And maybe this is a good use case for the anti-fraud APIs, right?
Maybe that's from Monica, I can see. I'm not going to get involved in like mail-in voting discussions in a forum. That's as far as my politics go, is using an iPhone to have a look inside a counting room.
Well, thanks a lot, Jeff. And we're right at time to introduce Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith, work from what? I'll let you introduce yourself, actually. And you will talk about 25 years of experience of network APIs.
Many thanks, Magnus, and thanks, Jeff, and all the other speakers so far. Really interesting. I'm just going to share, so hopefully you can all see that there. And as Magnus says, I'm going to talk about 25 years experience of using and being involved with network APIs, especially at an industry level. So day one for me, so I work for Vodafone. I'm a distinguished engineer at Vodafone working in the networks division. My first day at Vodafone did involve using network APIs. This involved USSD, which for those who remember was a very basic but quite useful technology, which allowed basic interaction with menus and menu-driven content. And this would involve third-party content providers providing their content to the network. The end user would effectively dial a certain series of numbers, hashes, stars, etc., and navigate through that content. That was also mixed up with a location service fulfilled by a older technology called Parlay, which attempted to take what was in the mobile core network and expose it outwards. And this was for a cinema finder application, find and book tickets for your local cinema. And it was on that day one I realized that network APIs were really incredibly difficult to use. Now, flash forward a year or so, and you started to see the emergence of digital content on phones. So mobile operators, including Vodafone, many around the world, offered what could be thought of as the precursor to apps. So things like news, ringtones, wallpapers, and games. And these were not available over an app store like you'd find today from Apple or Android, but via what was called the walled garden of that given operator. So in Vodafone's case, it was called Vodafone Live, for example. There was iMode in Japan, etc., etc. And these involved an early form of network API in that it wasn't the operator producing this content. They got it from developers, provisioned by XML over HTTP. And in there were functions which allowed the operator's customer to purchase this content. Now, these purchases were tied to the customer's network identity, so their subscription, usually their MSISDN, let's say, which identifies their subscription account. And this caused a problem because there were many networks that a developer producing such content would need to deal with. So which mobile network started to matter? So the developer had to know the mobile network operator for a given customer, and that's not trivial. It's also not static because of number portability. A customer could churn to another operator should they wish. They would need to know the business process for that operator, who to talk to. They would need to know the technical interface, discover it, learn it, use it. And that's for every operator in each country. So if you do that once, you've maybe got 20, 25, 33% of customers. And that's a lot of effort to do that. So you started to get the rise of aggregators in the early 2000s, which would simplify this development and achieve reach, or as Alicia called earlier, scale. Then there came two major disruptions to this model. So the walled garden started to diminish for two reasons. One was the rise of the iPhone and Android. So app developers started being attracted to these two cutting edge platforms. You know, they're very exciting, they're great look and feel for users. And secondly, browsing the internet on phones became mainstream. It's maybe hard to believe now, but back in the day, it wasn't actually straightforward to browse the internet. You were steered toward the walled garden of the operator for all your news, your weather, etc. And so because of these two factors, which network was no longer a critical question for a developer who wanted to publish content, sell content, etc. through smartphones. And so operators had to rethink how to remain relevant to developers. And so I mentioned Parlay earlier on. That was a very nascent attempt for exposing what the network knows and can do to other systems. But you started to get a rethink of how network APIs should be presented to developers, let's say. So as Jeff was saying earlier, we got network APIs effectively model something the network can do, call someone, build someone, message them, etc., or something the network knows, customer's location, their status, their age range, etc. And I agree with Jeff. Actually, I think it's that second one which is probably more important. The network APIs, as I mentioned, the early ones were really difficult to use, and they were more kind of targeting B2B rather than the web developers, the app developers, the long tail, as it started to become known. So even though operators started to think in this way, there was still many operators, and so you still had technical and business fragmentation. So the first attempt to improve this was the infamous and notorious One API. Great name. I still think it's a great name. It was actually an acronym, stood for Open Network Enablers. And what this aimed to do was to simplify network APIs and allow developers to achieve reach. And some things went right. First of all, there was some developer outreach to say, well, look, what is useful to you? And it turned out to be location. What is a customer's location? Charging somebody's bill, whether they're a prepay or postpay customer, and the ability to send an SMS. The APIs were developed to be web friendly. They were JSON over HTTP. There was a one-page get started website, which for the day was really quite groundbreaking, because normally you'd have to delve through lots of links, lots of Word documents to work out what to do. And as a side effect, it was actually used internally by operators to expose network information and functions within operators, because actually that's a tricky thing to do and something that operators maybe still struggle with. So some things went right, some things that went less right. And we've heard some of these before when Henry was speaking. You had different operators, network mismatch. They had a different ability to fulfill API calls. So it wasn't a consistent offering to developers. There was very little executive support. I remember presenting this to executives who said, this is like giving away the crown jewels. Yeah. We had to say that, well, actually, you can go and see the crown jewels. You pay to go to see them. They're guarded, and you don't walk away with them. So you can actually do this in a way where you're not giving away all the business value. There was little buy-in from the business, so there wasn't any business wrap or developer experience, and that is absolutely crucial. There needs to be a developer life cycle as part of making use of network APIs, all the way from discovery to payment to assurance, etc., that works well, and that wasn't really covered. Because of these factors, there was little uptake, because there was developers that aren't really compelled by a sandbox only model. So we had a nice sandbox, but it didn't actually do anything. It just gave dummy API responses. Despite all this, it was deployed successfully in one major country by all the operators. And for several months, it was actually doing very well and generating incremental revenue. However, to cut a long story short, somebody bought something via One API which shouldn't have been bought, let's say, and the system was shut down. So it was derailed by a policy breach. So the policy aspects hadn't really been fully baked in to the implementation. And then finally, I mentioned developer outreach, but only the SDKs were developed on GitHub, not the APIs. So it was kind of designed by committee, and then the SDKs were handed off. So as a result, the scorecard there, you can see it maybe got a couple of things right, but 4 crucial things wrong. So the next attempt was WAC, terrible name, Wholesale Application Community Network APIs. And it took me a while to come up with the positives here. The first thing was that the Evolved Packet Core, the LTE core, was getting traction by this stage, and that better supports API fulfillment. And secondly, there were more industry members than in one API, so you started to broaden the thinking, let's say. But again, things went wrong. The newer networks were not universally deployed, so you still had that network mismatch thing I mentioned earlier. Still little executive support. The operator business units were now supporting APIs within the operators, but not cross-operator. There was a feeling that developers would come to one operator who could do it all. They could achieve all the reach, but of course they can't. You know, you can only charge your customer. You can only locate your customer, but that didn't really sink in. So along with insufficient developer engagement and involvement and a lack of understanding, which included, as Jeff just mentioned, you know, to many developers that they weren't banging on the door saying, give us these network APIs. They were coming up with just ways of doing things because they're very smart. It just didn't take off again. And also by this stage, it was still cellular APIs only. There was no concept of Wi-Fi or fixed being in the mix. So again, the scorecard is looking pretty poor. There's maybe a slight uplift in the fact that the LTE was more widely available, but that was kind of it. Now, the third attempt to improve this, the GSMA One API exchange, of which I was the architect, was a framework for API interoperability. And you could think of this almost as a very early attempt at Open Gateway or some of the Open Gateway concepts. So this would give a single technical interface and a single business interface for developers. Essentially, you would sign up with one operator, but accept the terms and conditions for others. You could make an API call to just one operator and it would be passed on to others to fulfill. But again, this only works if there's widespread operator deployment. And again, unfortunately, there wasn't much traction from the executives or business. So the scorecard's improving, but again, no business support, no reach, and those are absolutely critical. So if we think of Kamara and Open Gateway as attempt number 4, why do I believe that will work? So the problems of the past are starting to be overcome. So first of all, the networks are at least Evolved Packet Core, and the more API native 5G SA is being deployed. So that's a good thing. We've seen and heard from Henry, you know, the executives are now strongly supportive of network APIs. And that includes, for the first time, vocal support for cross-operator initiatives, Kamara, Open Gateway, TMF, all working together. Crucially, the business teams recognize that the operator is not the only channel. So previously, it was the case that an operator would build an API gateway, let's say, and say, well, that's it. That's the only way to interact with us. But it's now the case where channel partners are being actively encouraged, because that's where the developer traction is. You know, they have huge developer ecosystems. Let's start to bake these functions into those ecosystems. And finally, I'd say it's developed by community, not committee. So, for example, the fact that Kamara is developed on GitHub, anybody can join in, participate, pull requests, issues, improvements, etc., join the calls. This is good news. But we need to make sure we deliver on the following. First of all, as we heard earlier, you can't assume telco expertise. You know, the how it gets fulfilled, that's up to the operator. So we heard the phrase intent-based APIs. What is it that you want to do, and leave the fulfillment to the operator? You need to account for all network types. If it's the case that a particular network can't fulfill what you need to do, that should be transparent, and at least allow the developer what to do next. The outcome of an API should be really clear. The why. Why would you use this? So, for example, if you, SimSwap's a good example, number verify. If you just have those in isolation and say, I want to know when a SIM was last inserted in a different device, in and of itself, that doesn't sound particularly compelling. But if you start to build a story around it saying, oh, but that's actually a good indicator to pass into a fraud mitigation system, then you start to understand the why. Network APIs must be easy to discover and use, reduce the developer effort. Developers are putting time and money into this, reduce the friction. Echoing Jeff's point just now, the API fulfillment, how the APIs are actually realized, it has to be timely, consistent, accurate, cost-effective, and assured. And by assured, what I mean is, if you are a developer who is spending hard-earned money, let's say on some premium APIs, 1,000 location lookups, for example, you will have a different view of how many of them works than the operator will. But you need a channel to go back to challenge that, get reconciliation, get assurance that something worked or didn't. That's super important. And then finally, working closely with the developers, the API customers. That are the customers here. And so in the same way that operators should treat their end customers well, this should be the case with developers too. I would also say that it's important to follow and listen to expert analysts. So we got Dean on later, which is brilliant. Alan Quayle, for example, he's been talking about telco APIs for decades, and in fact came to some of the WAC meetings and told the operators very clearly about the business wrap issue. Jeff, others, please do listen to them, even if it's challenging views, because it's those that will surface the problems that need to be solved. And if we get all of these right, then we've got a very good chance of meeting all those criteria, and that will achieve success. And that's me.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Kevin. That's very interesting. I'll just go straight to the next speaker. Paul, you want to introduce yourself and what you're going to speak about?
Yeah, Paul Fonte. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Yes, I'm Paul Fonte. I'm a director in the Future Infrastructure Group at CableLabs. And what I wanted to provide today was more of a wireline perspective for these network APIs. So diving in, what is CableLabs? For those who are not familiar, CableLabs, we're a R&D consortium for our membership. What we try to do is provide a broad ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem, introduce new vendors, create interoperability for our members. Our members, to be a member of CableLabs, you have to operate an HFC DOCSIS protocol network. Now, with that said, when we looked at network as a service a few years ago and started digging into this, we know that majority of our members operate more than just HFC networks. They also operate fiber and mobile. And so we looked at this and said, this is a great opportunity. If we can expose these intent-based APIs, align with what's going on within Kamara, with what's going on with the GSMA, to be access technology agnostic. And so how can we provide new services that go beyond connectivity? And so we've done several lab POCs and use cases. We've worked with Domos and the quality of outcome. We've done some other services with our members. The one I wanted to highlight today was really to show the capability and the power of what you can do with Wi-Fi as well. So Wi-Fi, it could be fixed wireless access, could be across HFC, could be fiber as well. But the Wi-Fi network and being able to connect, and the importance of the Wi-Fi network in these network APIs. And so one of the POCs we did is called Traveler Wi-Fi or Explore Wi-Fi. And what that was is we worked with our members is how can you take guests of hotels and short-term rentals and provide them an enhanced Wi-Fi experience. When we talked with hotels and some of the field trials that some of our members are doing, they said 80 to 85% of the calls down at the front desk are Wi-Fi related. And so how can we create a private, secure network for Wi-Fi guests, or for guests of either short-term rentals or hotels, allow them to select their desired speed during their stay and make sure that was secure. And so that was really the goal of it. And so what I'll show you now is just a quick demo of the application that we built. And so what I'll do is, this is mimicking essentially like an Airbnb, or you could a Vantage or Bonvoy or Hyatt application. So as a guest, I'll come in and I'll say I want to pick a stay at a beach house. We'll pick today, and I'll check out here on Sunday. So I booked the reservation. We fast forward. Now it's ready. I'm ready to check in. I go to check in, and I'm prompted with, we're going to spin up a private network for for this instance, it's at a home, so it'd be an SSID. I decide that I would want to do my home network, and I'll do my home password, so that way the family, all their devices will connect. So I'll click that. Then I'm prompted with what speed tier I would like. Since in this scenario, I have the whole family, I'll go ahead and pick a gig down and 100 up. And then I'll submit. And so what's happening is, now this isolated network has been spun up. I now have this speed tier for the duration of my stay. If I do a speed test, I see that I'm getting those speeds. And upon checkout, when I'm done, it spins that network down. And so we looked at this as from both the hotel and short-term rental. It's just a way to provide that enhanced experience. And so I'll walk you through what you just saw. So what happened first is we called the essentially it's the network access management API that's a part of Komara. So when the guest checks in, that API will then be called into the network operator's gateway. That then turns that up on the CP, the access point at the premise. And then that now logs in, and that's now the guest private network. So that's the first API that's being called, and the first endpoint that's being called. Then what's happening is they select their desired speed tier. The home network quality on demand API is then called for the quality of service through the gateway. It then provides that speed tier on the premise for the duration of the stay. And so what's happening is for the private network, in terms of, not to get too deep into the weeds, but in terms of the commercial side, if you're at a hotel, commercial APs support VLAN. And so that's essentially creating a network slice for that guest during their stay. So there's not multiple SSIDs. In terms of a short-term rental where you're on premise, you're at a residence, most CPs will support multiple SSIDs. So you have that private network, and it spins down, and you don't have to worry about your credentials or all those things being left in Netflix and those sort of things. So those are the two APIs called. And so really the outcome of that POC is we were able to spin that up using that application in 4 different countries with 4 different members in real time. And so we're able to make that API call, and it really highlights the importance of that alignment between network operators and developers. Some of our members are in field trials right now going out with this service. This piece of it, the last piece is this kind of recipe book, is viewing these APIs as really ingredients to a service, right? You're really calling 2 endpoints to get this service, but it provides this enhanced service for users. And so seeing that B2B to C opportunity, business opportunity, we think there's tremendous what else could be expanded if you start looking at the APIs that are in Komara. And then just accounting for really the wireline technology. But we've heard from several of the developers we've talked to about the importance of Wi-Fi and mobile. They want multiple coverage. They have users of their applications that connect to devices through both. And so providing those enhanced services beyond connectivity is critical. And so with that, I will see if there are any questions.
Let me check if anyone has popped up, or I will have to make some up. Oh, we have good. So there's been a lot of discussions in both of these webinar series on the mobile versus fixed. Are there kind of technical solution to this? Will everything be similar, or will it be different? Like how different do you think it is?
I'm sorry, I thought you were reading through the chat.
No, sorry. So kind of the question is, okay, how similar will APIs be between fixed and mobile? For the developer, will they be the same?
Yeah, the same. Everything that we've done, any contributions, our alignment with Kamara, in that scenario, the speed, essentially speed boost or speed enhancement. We have what we call our 10G lab that has a mobile HFC core and fiber core, and we were able to provide that service through the API calls that to each one of those three. So it's critical that these APIs are access technology agnostic, that they align, because really at the end of the day, developers really don't care what the underlying connectivity is. They just want to make sure that they can get these services that they're calling for. So we have been able, and in anything we've contributed. Now we did help a little bit with the quality on demand of accounting, a little bit more of the wireline capabilities, but we've been very lockstep that everything is access technology agnostic.
Perfect. There's no more questions here, but Dean, if you're ready, we can just get started with you.
Yeah, hi there. Thanks, Magnus. And I realise now that I'm wearing the wrong colour shirt, given there's an England-Netherlands match this evening, so I'm going to have to change that later on. But let me share my screen. And okay, that should be coming up any second now. So I'm an industry analyst, and thanks for Kevin for name checking me. I've got a slightly different presentation. I'm a bit of a skeptic on most things, but particularly on the quality on demand, and especially from a B2B point of view. So I wanted to talk through where I see that, where I see it working, and where I see it not working. And hopefully I'll leave some time for some questions. Can I just check that you can see the slides okay, Magnus?
I can.
Good. Right. So I'm a industry analyst. I've been following a whole range of areas relevant to this for a long time. So yeah, I've actually covered, I realized, network APIs, not quite as long as Kevin, but about 2008, I think, was the first one mention I could find. And also CPaaS and other APIs since about 2011. I've been around long enough to see, I think it's 5 iterations of Deutsche Telekom's API efforts going back to the Troppo APIs in 2012. So there's a bit of history here and lots of lessons to be learned. And unusually, I cover both the sort of voice and video and CPaaS part of the market, and also a lot of my current work is on wireless, 6G, spectrum policy, Wi-Fi, and so on. So I will readily admit that I sometimes refer to myself as a slice denier. I put this post up on LinkedIn a couple of years ago on my newsletter, and I've got serious doubts about a lot of the discussion around network slicing. Now, I should say that in terms of some of the network APIs that are happening at the moment, the stuff on fraud management and SIM swap detection and location, I think is interesting. I think the location APIs as a mechanism for getting around GPS spoofing sounds very interesting. That's something that I'm keeping an eye on as well. But I think in terms of the network quality and performance and QoS, I've been a long-term skeptic of that in multiple ways. I want to introduce some of the reasons for that, but also where I think it can work. So maybe I should call myself a sort of slicing skeptic rather than denier. First thing is, and it follows on from the presentation just now, when I speak to people about network as a service, they say it's been around for years. I went to a cloud and data center conference recently, and there were people talking about networks as a service, spinning up connections between multiple data centers for enterprise application workloads running in different places, whether it's in core data centers or edge or anywhere else, setting up SD-WAN connections, global networks. This stuff isn't new, and a lot of it is in a fixed domain. And the same thing, I was very glad to hear the Wi-Fi presentation just now. It fits in what Broadband Forum does, some of the stuff that MEF does, the Metro Ethernet people rather than the mobile ecosystem forum people.
Okay.
And sorry, there's someone's audio I can hear. I think it might be Jeff. And the other thing I would make a distinction here is that network APIs can relate to the core and transport domain the access or last mile part of the network, but also a really important distinction here is between the sort of wide area access, whether that's fixed or mobile, and what I'll call on-site and in-premise networks, where that's the domain of Wi-Fi, of private networks, even things like Matter and Bluetooth for IoT and smart home as well. And I think that what I'm expecting to see is quite a lot of the real heavy lifting of APIs, particularly for business and enterprise and IoT applications, to be on the very localized dimension. And there's a reason for this, is that a lot of the use of not just mobile networks, but wireless overall is indoors. And we don't talk about this. You know, almost all of the use cases that get talked about for 5G, whether that's industrial automation, healthcare, education, VR, a lot of media consumption, gaming, almost all of that occurs indoors. There are some really important outdoor applications, whether that's drones or vehicles or utility grids and some emergency services. But that's important because wireless indoors, firstly, about 90% of it is delivered via Wi-Fi, especially to home devices like TVs, but also because the propagation, and we haven't heard anyone talk about the quality of wireless networks, the propagation and the quality and performance of wireless inside walls and glass is much less than it is out on the street. It's also much less predictable, depends if a building has an indoor specialized coverage system or not. And that becomes a real issue if you want to provide quality on demand. You don't know the quality in someone's basement, in someone's house, in someone's office or school or wherever else. And that's something we need to think about when we look at the APIs and whether the APIs are well enough informed on the back end to say, actually, we can't deliver that in this place at that time. So I think that's something to think about from a developer point of view. And we have to think there's lots of different indoor environments here. So what works in a stadium or an airport might not work in a factory or a multi-dwelling unit, an apartment block. And you can sort of also consider things like buses and trains to be sort of indoors as well. And in fact, I do quite a lot of work on the rail industry, and there's even people now trying to do laser etching of train windows to improve the propagation of wireless signals through into the carriages of the trains so people can use it. And that's an issue if you start to think about services like the gaming low latency, is if your $10 a month plan says, by the way, this won't work at the basement, on the train, when you're roaming, and various other places, sorry about that. Are people going to buy it? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that there needs to be at least awareness on the developer's point of view and also the operator side that these limitations do occur, because this is going to be a challenge. And we have to think that even a building that is notionally with coverage will have areas where it may not. So if you've got a connected vehicle, for example, it's an underground parking garage, or you're an elevator engineer inside a metal elevator in a concrete part of the inner part of the building, you've got very, very different requirements from the connectivity for your connected car or your VR headset than you might do if you're in the lobby or standing by a window. On that matter, this is going to get worse in future. We are creating, because of a lot of the requirements on new building construction and sustainability and energy efficiency, we're creating buildings which are essentially Faraday cages. So this is a picture of a beer that I had. You can see it's I'm sitting right by a window in an area around the back of King's Cross. If anyone knows London, this is a really new business district. Just in that direction, there's the massive new Samsung mobile showroom. And I got zero mobile coverage, which was not ideal given they had QR code menus and there was no obvious Wi-Fi password. In the end, I used Nextdoor's Wi-Fi, which was, ironically enough, Google DeepMind's office next door. But the point being here is that we are going to be ever more in locations with variable cellular and often Wi-Fi availability and coverage, which is perhaps not obvious from the API. And I think this is an area that I think we need to think about, is the sort of the availability and maybe cross-referencing with mapping and other data of what works in what places at a quite granular detail. And it may well be on one side of that window it's fine, and on the other it is not. So to me, this is like a a real sort of dirty secret for some of the slicing and QoD aspects of this, which is, if there's no reliable network coverage and performance, and that doesn't just mean an icon on your phone lighting up, because that you can do that with a very thin layer of coverage. We need to have reliable, high performance, ideally sort of mid-band, lots of spectrum. I'm not going to get into a spectrum discussion right now. And the question is, where will that work? My view is that there's three main classes of place, and we have to think about this in terms of location for the application. That this can work. One is private networks, which are specifically engineered for a port or a factory or a warehouse or a mine or something like that. And I think the APIs can work inside that network quite well. You will be designing that network, whether it's done by an operator or a systems integrator or the enterprise themselves. For particular applications, it's the robot in the factory, that maybe needs line of sight to 2 of the small cells in the building. But once you've got that, you can prioritize robot 7 against robot 3 if that's more important. And I think that that's an area, and whether it's using network slicing or QCI and other QoS mechanisms is up for discussion. But I think that the private 5G networks, and to an extent the private 4G networks, we will certainly see those capabilities being valid. The other thing that I'm seeing is specific venues where the wireless has been set up really carefully. So you can imagine an F1 circuit or a music festival or a sports stadium where they've had lots of engineers to go in, do surveys, plan how much capacity is needed, and then you can imagine that you can have, let's say, the F1 fan app, which has got real-time video footage from a drone following the race cars. And if you've got the fan app, you get the quality that you require for that application, because the network has been designed and there's a partnership between the F1 authorities and the circuit and the operators and the app developer to create this sort of experience. And I think that will work quite well. And we see this, things like payment terminals at music festivals might be another example of this. But again, that requires a fair amount of engineering expertise, and over time it should get easier, but we shouldn't assume this can just be cut and paste to every potential venue. And the last one is metro areas, particularly in places where the government takes a strong interest in having not just coverage, but actually measures the capability. They perhaps push building owners to install good in-building systems or Wi-Fi offload, perhaps. I can imagine a Singapore or a Qatar or somewhere like that being high on the list here, perhaps not in certain regions of London, unfortunately. So I think that from a developer point of view, you have to think about the physical location. This is very different to someone's apartment or their basement, or being in a countryside or on a quiet road in the middle of nowhere. And so the network landscape is going to get ever more complicated as well. So it's not just public operator networks and Wi-Fi, as we've heard, but there's also going to be private cellular networks in some places. There's going to be MVNOs, which I'm glad we've discussed on this. There will be satellite, which may or may not be integrated with anything else. And there's going to be some specialist IoT networks as well. And you might find that some of these are owned by the building owner, some of them are run by the operators. There's a new breed of organizations called neutral hosts, which is sort of like tower companies, which might be providing the in-building coverage. And we're going to need some way of bringing all these people on board, because it was interesting to hear about the coverage issues for APIs. And we have to think about coverage not just in terms of number of operators or number of subscribers, but actual physical floor space or land mass area. And I think that this is going to get quite complicated for certain applications where there's unpredictability involved. So for me, the other dirty secret is, and this feeds back to what Jeff was saying, I think there's some value in network awareness and insight, as well as the control and the performance. It's like, is there coverage at this place at this time? And it could be real time, or it could be on a Tuesday afternoon at Oxford Circus, or a match day in Wembley Stadium in seat number, row 7, seat 338. Is there likely to be coverage? Do I need to book some form of QoS for that? Do I need to use a workaround and pre-download or cache data, or send a message to the user saying, we'll upload the video to Instagram later on? You might have to think about this if you're in a vehicle between point Y and point Z. And I think that those type of things might be interesting. Is the informative, the data APIs as much as the performance control. I'm going to skip through this. Basically, I'm unconvinced that there's that much overlap between the CPaaS world and what I'll call hard network APIs. I think the CPaaS is absolutely interesting. There's a lot of valued things here, things like the contact centers and customer agents who may well want to have the SIM swap and fraud detection. So I think that you'll have some synergies on things which are very B2C, which are personal oriented, that are around the person, where they are they using the right device? Is there a risk that they're not where they say they are? Perhaps there's boundaries from a regulatory point of view. Where I start to find it more doubtful is where we add APIs which are more around this sort of network performance and quality, whether that's on the wireless or Wi-Fi side, whether it's on the enterprise and fixed side like SD-WAN, or some of the stuff on IoT we haven't really talked about today. And here I'm really not that convinced that there's a direct parallel with the CPaaS world. I know companies like Twilio tried to do IoT SIMs for a while, but I think it's given up on it. It's got its own 5G core as well. I think there are some touch points you can justify here for certain organizations that maybe, I don't know, they need to do calls between, or video call from a drone to a subject matter expert, using WebRTC or something like that. Is it going to go via the same platform? I'm not sure, maybe. And then I think there's others where I think there's really zero synergy, and these will have to be done independently. I think there's some of the network insight and awareness APIs, the fine-grained control over the radio network stuff, especially if it goes down to the level of Open RAN RIC applications or Wi-Fi cloud controllers, I think is going to be very much in a separate universe. And the last one, spectrum and regulatory, I'll come on to in a sec. So I think from my point of view, there's definitely value in the information APIs. Maybe there's some work to be done with the network mapping and quality and assurance vendors here. This is from a company called Amina, but there's a ton of others that do essentially heat maps of where there is good signal, whether in building or a particular operator or Wi-Fi and anything else. And the other one, which is a bit of an outlier here, is I think it's really interesting things for regulators here. And I've been spending a lot of time on the policy and regulatory side of it. And I think that both in terms of information for regulators, is their coverage, is their performance, often operators say there's a lot of work involved in providing data to the regulatory authorities. So maybe APIs can allow that to be automated and allow the governments to get better data without putting the burden on the operator staff. And the last one I would say is, particularly for enterprises and private networks, there's a slow drift to what I'll call spectrum as a service. You get this a bit in the US with the CBRS platform, allowing you to essentially book spectrum in certain places for certain uses. Wi-Fi 6E and 7 for 6 gigahertz is a system called AFC, which does that. But ultimately, this then, if you really want to go down this route as networks as a service, you may have to go as far as the spectrum, as well as the backhaul and the radio and everything else. I'll leave that for now. You can find me on LinkedIn. I've got a newsletter. I do a bunch of stuff on wireless, on fiber, on policy, and then I'll turn it back to Magnus. Perfect. Thanks a lot. And the next question, of course, is like, how much will Ofcom pay for this API? Well, it depends. It depends if there's some quid pro quo. If you want to have new spectrum, then maybe you put the Ofcom XApp into your Open RAN RIC and let us collect the data we want. We'll see. But I must admit, some of the numerical forecasts I see, let's just say I had an interesting LinkedIn to and fro with McKinsey about some of their numbers. I think that they are, let's just say, bullish. Well, okay. I'll leave it at that. We haven't had any questions, but just I forgot to mention it earlier. Like we are recording this, so all the videos will be available, and I'm sure most panelists will also have their slides made available. So there's that as well. But with that, I'll leave it to Thomas. Thomas.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you, Marcus, for organizing and inviting me. I feel humbled with all these great speakers. So if you give me 1 second, I will share my my screen. 1 second. Can you see my presentation?
Perfectly.
Okay. So today I'm here after all these great speakers to share what has been our experience in helping MNOs in the road towards exposing not only 5G, but also 4G data via APIs, and how this has enabled better observability, enabled to build automation use cases much faster, and enabled monetization by exposing this to third parties. So I will tell you a little bit about my story first. I was an operations engineer in an MNO. As soon as I graduated, I started working at an MNO and got frustrated with how difficult it was to access data, to build use cases, and to really innovate. I saw my friends in the software industry and said, hey, this has to change. So I quit and I founded YLab in we started in 2018. So the first thing we did is we solved for a couple of customers in Latin America, observability. How can you have observability in a single pane of glass? Then we evolved to doing that in 5G. Later on, we decided to productize that. We built an NWDAF in partnership with Elastic, and took this NWDAF to 21 5G operators globally. I heard everyone give us their feedback on NWDAF, and the main feedback was, hey, this is not quite our focus now. We're migrating from 4G to 5G. We have a lot of more mundane problems on how can we fix automation? How can we monetize our network? And that's when we evolved this product into being able to expose all network data via APIs and a developer portal to enable telco internal developers to build use cases and third parties to build them as well. And these APIs that we expose include Kamara. So here I'm here to share my experience and how we did it from the beginning and what is our recommended path to enable these APIs in a network. So what are the challenges that brought us to exposing 4G and 5G network data via APIs? We started with, this is a very mundane problem, but it's very real. Late incident detection. We had the problem that the EMS of vendors were giving us data with 15-minute granularity, or sometimes even 30 minutes late and 15 minutes granularity. And we had data silos for each vendor in the network. So we built collectors that could interact with the network elements in real time instead of going through the EMS of vendors. Second, once we had all this data, we had the problem that data was not normalized across different vendors or different technologies. Everyone exposed this data in a different way. So what we did is we built a normalization layer so that whenever someone wants to access data, they don't have to care if it's a Nokia P gateway or a Cisco P gateway or whatever behind this. You could extract data, abstracting yourself from the vendor and from the network element. With this, we enabled engineers to build hundreds of different use cases, different dashboards that made their work more efficient. We gave them an out-of-the-box set of use cases, but then it was unleashed upon them. They started building use cases over and over again with the tools that we provided. But this was not enough. Now we need to automate incident resolution. We cannot be watching 100 different dashboards at the same time. So that's when we stumbled upon APIs. APIs is a great way to expose this data so that you can automate the network. You can have triggers. You can have people in your other organizations like automation or AI ops accessing the data without going to the engineers and having to ask them, where is this? How can I access it? How can I interpret it? And the final question is, how can I monetize this? And the monetization piece, here Camara plays a very important role. We see there are two paths to monetization. First, exposing this data to your vendors so that they can implement new services much faster, so it's faster time to revenue. But second, exposing this data to outside developers so that you can monetize these APIs and everything that we have been hearing all of this afternoon. Now, with Camara, we had a lot of questions, and if you're starting this journey, I want to share with you some of the questions that we hear, some of the answers that we give, and maybe someone here in the audience can help us. The first one, hey, I want to implement Camara, but how can I fit it data? Camara is a set of contracts on how to expose data to the outside world. But how can I feed it from the network, all the data that it needs? How can I implement it? How can I make it fast? And how can I make it not a project that does not take me 1 year of my engineers to build? And second, how can I integrate Camara to a broader API strategy? And third, I hear, hey, this is great, but we're just starting our 5G SA journey. We have a lot of things in 4G and even 3G and even 2G. So if we're going to a culture that leverages APIs on all of its benefits, how can this be backwards compatible? So we created a solution that answers some of these questions. And I will share it to you now and share this experience. So the solution is basically it's a turnkey solution that allows you to collect all of the data in the 4G and 5G networks. We collect this data in real time, leveraging our own collectors for 4G and legacy technologies because there's no standard. NWDAF and eBPF, a lot of different ways to collect this data. Then the next step is normalize this data so that you don't have, so that you can expose meaningful information. That is the meaningful information normalized across technologies from 2G to 5G SA and correlated so that this information is meaningful. Then you expose it via APIs. Here, we believe that, well, we can share our experience and the use cases that we have already built, but these are the first stepping stone to enabling your engineers and third parties in your company to build their own use cases. So we have a set of observability use cases, automation use cases, and third-party services. But again, this is a stepping stone. This is the first step to empowering your engineers that are the ones that know the network the best, that know their problems the best, your vendors, to be able to unleash all of this, the power that this data brings to you. So what are some of the APIs that we have today ready to be exposed? These can be divided into 4 different categories. First, Network Insights APIs. These are mainly useful for operations and engineering within an MNO. This be able to understand and to see in real-time throughput, the call success, the success of different processes within the network, the number of subscribers, traffic per OTT or application, analyzing CDRs, understanding the experience of our roaming customers and where they're roaming from. Then we have User Insights APIs. What is the service experience? Being able to calculate the service experience and understand the service experience in a region or on a particular site. Understand the services enabled by the user. This is very useful for customer support. Understanding what sites are congested and what are the heavy users in that site. What is the traffic in that site? so that we can remediate it with traffic shaping. Then we have NWDAF analytics. NWDAF is a 3GPP network function, network data analytics function that this is only for 5G SA, that helps you understand NF load, the mobility of the IUE, do geofencing use cases, service experience and congestion, and Camara APIs that include SIM swap, device location, and location verification. This has been sorry that I go so fast, but these are some of the APIs with which you can start enabling your network engineers to leverage these APIs, or you can enable third parties to leverage your APIs. So one of the things that happened to me when I was an operator, I got tired of seeing PowerPoint presentations. And then you wanted to implement and no one had anything ready. This goes beyond PowerPoint. Here I'm sharing real responses from these APIs from real networks, that retrieving location that you can expose in Camara, understanding the service experience in one site, listing the heavy users in one site. What is the throughput in different technologies, through 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, etc. So we talked about a turnkey solution that has these APIs and that they're real. Now, what is the roadmap that we see most feasible to start taking your company into an API-enabled company? So the first thing that we see is there needs to be a transformation in the culture within the company. The low-hanging fruit here is empower operations engineers to build new observability use cases to detect incidents sooner. Give them multi-vendor data, cross-technology data, all via API, so that they can start building new dashboards, new alarms, and even predicting incidents that might happen. Second, this is very useful to enable AIOps and automation teams. When you talk to automation teams, one of the biggest problems is they don't know where the data is. They have to go to the operations engineer and ask, well, where is the data that will tell me this? Well, it's in that database over there. But the operations engineer is putting out fires, and he does not have time to answer to this guy. So every new use cases for automation engineers or AIOps engineers takes a lot of time in this friction within the company. So to remove this friction, being able to expose network data via APIs that are well documented, and it's a way that every developer understands on how to build use cases, is we've seen great results here. Second, all of this is operational benefits. Now let's start going to monetization. That is if they're business people from companies, this is a more interesting part. So exposing your data to the outside world is a big leap. So the first step that we have done with a client of ours is not expose it to the outside world, but expose it to vendors that and enable them to deploy new services that can be monetized much faster. We will show you a use case where a vendor deployed a service that usually takes 12 to 14 months to implement in 6 weeks, thanks to having all of these data and capabilities available via APIs. And the last step is exposing this to the outside world. Oh, I'm having an issue here. Sorry, I don't know why. So let's talk about results. Having core network data normalized and exposed in real time via APIs allowed a client of ours to reduce the average time to incident detection from 15 minutes to 2 minutes. This is very significant. for a NOC manager, one of their biggest pain points is hearing from customer support that something is wrong and he has not seen it before, or he's not aware yet. So this is very, very important for NOC managers, and very important to improve the service experience in your network. Having all of this data and being able to do anomaly detection, forecasting, having cross-vendor. Here we have, for example, a Cisco network and a Nokia network, a multi-vendor network, and dashboards in the same Grafana is very, very useful. So all of this allowed us to build ourselves and to enable our customers to build more than 50 use cases that analyze user plane, control plane, and service experience by having all of the metrics, alarms, logs, CDRs, and EDRs, and all of the data that comes from it exposed via APIs. Another use case that is very interesting is automation. And within automation, I chose to share with you today how a client of ours is automating service experience improvement. So in this case, what we did is we have a service experience index calculated by us and exposed via APIs. And we are identifying the worst, the sites in the network with the worst service experience. Then we're going and analyzing for the root cause. And for that, whenever there's not a network problem, like a fiber cut or something like that, we see that one of the main issues is congestion. And we analyze congestion, we analyze what are the heavy users on that side, and what is the traffic in that side. And how much traffic is video on demand traffic for one side. So why do we do this? So that we can, all of this is exposed via API, so it can be done automatically. And we can automatically trigger a video on demand traffic shaping. So we shape the traffic of only video on demand and only for heavy users. This does not affect their experience because video on demand applications have buffering. And by shaping the traffic for this 1% of the users, you improve the service experience for the other 99%. All of these are use cases that are very useful for improving the service experience of your customers, but also for proving that this API approach works, because some of the more technology focused people see the usefulness in APIs, but we have to transmit it to our business partners. And finally, the last use case is one of our clients wanted to implement a security solution by Akamai that allowed you to filter traffic. You could do a profile. If you are an SMB, you can filter all malicious links and because you don't have an IT department, or you can filter the adult content for your kids. And this was implemented. This is a very successful product, but takes 12 to 14 months to implement. And thanks to having all of this data exposed via APIs, it was implemented in 6 weeks instead of 12 to 14 months. So this is some of our experience on how we helped implement APIs and what were the results. And basically what we do is, as a company, we have products and consulting so that any MNO can implement network APIs from the data collection to the exposure, so that you can have Camara and other complementary APIs in your network and start taking advantage of the value that they can bring. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tomas. I'll go straight to Kevin. Kevin, are you there? I can see you at least.
Yeah, I am here, yes. Thank you. I'm just gonna share my screen here. If I can do that. Okay, do I need something special to share?
You should be able to share a screen.
No, just give me a second here.
No worries.
Of course it Okay, are we sharing?
I
There we go.
cannot see. There you go.
Are we good?
No, I cannot see it. Ah, no, it's coming. Perfect.
There we go. And of course, it's got this in the way, so let's get rid of that. Okay, well, thank you for having me, and I recognize a couple of things. Number one, the speakers before me have been fantastic, so thank you to all for the information that you've provided. And secondly, I recognize it's at the end of the day, and I'm standing between a lot of people and a pub, especially getting a good position for the game coming up. So I'll try and get through my presentation fairly quickly.
Just so we know, Kevin, we are recording this, so like, and we've seen from previous webinars that actually more people are downloading the recording. So
okay, well, that's good. So hopefully there's some good content to show. So I'll do a brief introduction of myself and then get into the meat here. I'm Kevin Howe Patterson. I'm Chief Product Officer of Shibodi, and as kind of a way of introducing where I come from here. So as some people have pointed out, they were there at the start of Kamara. I was as well, representing Candy. We were very proud at that time to be part of Kamara, really believed in the mission statement, and Candy was a founding contributor. And so here I am now as part of Shibodi, and we are in Shibodi an active member of Kamara. Happy to see the growth, and personally as a member from the start, I'm very happy to see the evolution of Kamara and its adoption. So good work, Kamara team. It's come a long way. So we at Shibodi have been working with since our inception, working with network assets and working with intelligent assets. And we think that there's a few innovations that are really going to end up driving the game as we go forward. The first one is the realization that the network is a truly intelligent asset. In fact, programmable networks are incredibly intelligent, probably the most intelligent asset that any operator has. At least that's the way that we look at it. The second thing is that what we call network aware applications. And earlier there was a reference to network awareness, and we believe that that is a fundamental shift, a fundamental game changer, where the applications now can get insights and have the ability to understand and react to what's going on in the network. So we think that the network aware applications are true market event, true market opener, as well as the network APIs that ride on top. The third bit is, how do you derive benefits to all stakeholders? And there's a large number of stakeholders out there. So not just the vertical industries, but the developers. And so we think that, a third innovation that is emerging, and we're starting to see it. In DTW a couple of weeks ago, there was lots of talk about open ecosystems and componentization and various things like that. So we believe that, the innovation is not just the ecosystem. It has to be an open, collaborative, componentized ecosystem, and the business model has to be open and collaborative as well. So what does that ecosystem look like? Well, here's a snapshot of it. When we go in, we talk with a company, a customer, whether it's an operator or more often an end enterprise, regardless of what the vertical is, there's any number, there's a myriad of complex questions that need to be answered. Most of the time, they're starting with an existing set of applications and an existing network. And if you're in building, you really have to understand, well, how are you getting around the obstacles in building? If you're outside in the yard or you're on the road, it's a different set. And you could have 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, satellite, or there's any number of combinations. And they've already invested money in these. So they're not going to go down the path of saying, yeah, give me a brand new network. almost all the time it's a hybrid network of some sort. And that hybrid network can be private or it can be public as well. And so as you work through the stack, you look at it as, well, the network is a diverse set of capabilities. Even if they're all programmable, they all have different APIs, they all have different problems to solve. Their security, you can't just tie an application directly into the network. And coming up with a solution for an industry can be very difficult, right? So which one is going to win? Which vertical is going to drive all the money? Right. Earlier we heard, well, very difficult to tell. And with all the work that we've done in Shibodi, it is pretty difficult to tell where the drivers are coming from. So what we believe is really an important step is to really pay attention to the customers, to really understand what their drivers are, to really get in and understand the use cases. And you have to get into an open, iterative, agile model that is going to be based around building, trying, learning, and adapting. And it's going to take multiple cycles to get through. And in some cases, you're going to be solving just a really small problem. And that may require a fair bit of effort, and it may require knitting two networks together. And you may look at it and say, well, wait a minute, where's the money in that? Well, that's the first stepping stone to get to the next problem. And you solve that next problem, and then that gets you to the next problem. Before you know it, you've got a whole bunch of problems that you've solved, put them together, and you've got a treasure trove of capabilities that you can then move forward with. This is where the benefits come in from things like Kamara, TM Forum, the GSMA, Open Gateway, ORAN, and even Wi-Fi and Cable Labs, all the work that is being done to get the standards, to make things work better. It's a collaborative environment. And in the industry, if this is going to work, if it's really going to take off, we have to be open, flexible, and adaptable. And it truly is the network awareness, but not just the network aware applications, the entire ecosystem has to be flexible and capable of working towards network awareness. Eventually, we will get to a network API ecosystem. And I've drawn this inverted. It may, given that we're talking about the network and network APIs, some people may have looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, the network is the big thing. That's the big value that we're trying to expose and all that. And while that's true, I view that there's really two sides to this, and the two sides are competing. You've got your networks where we need to get the value delivered, and we need to get the API exposure. So we need to get those APIs built, and we need to do it in a consistent fashion. And it's not just the cellular, it's the broad network, because again, it is going to be very hybrid. All of the solutions that we're going to be starting out with are going to have multiple variations of technology that we're going to be driving towards. So we can either choose to stop, or we can say, we'll deal with it. And that's where an API platform comes in. That's where the commonality of the service, the operate, the service management, the network APIs that get exposed. That's where we get a lot of value, because the top part, the applications, are competing for their space. And in many cases, they don't care what's going on in the network. They're, as was stated earlier, they're not waiting for us to create these wonderful APIs so that they can do their job. They're out there solving problems, and they're doing it very rapidly. And they can do it with or without the network. What we believe is the value of the network is worth exposing, but it has to be done so that applications really take notice and really build that value. So if this API platform is done properly, you get application portability. And you get to the point within this ecosystem, componentized, reusable capabilities that allow us then to go out to, whether it B2B, B2C, whatever it would be, regardless of the underlying network, whether it's private, public, or whatever, we now have reusable components. We have reusable building blocks. And we start by looking at what's the use case, and then we build in. So the outside view, what is the user up to? What do they want? Let's build towards use the components that we have, build the solution. And we'll find that when we get this reusable, componentized, API-enabled ecosystem, the pieces come together much more quickly. No longer is it about monolithic applications. It's truly about using the power of the network and augmenting the applications to deliver these pieces of the solution that can be rapidly integrated and deliver the value that the stakeholders are looking for. I'll give an example of a use case that we have worked. Very complex. It's we call it a pit stop, but it's basically a racing environment, stadium, multi-network. They have very clear goals and outcomes: improve safety and improve odds of winning. Okay, very clear goals. How does that work? And how do we deliver that in a multi-network, multi-component environment? Well, the stack that we have here, and this is just a partial view of the stack. There's the lower part, which is the network, which has all kinds of different components and capabilities. And there's the upper part, all different types of applications, users, stakeholders. And it's a matter of taking these things, componentizing them, making sure that we have the right APIs exposed, the right capabilities out of the network, the right model, the administrative model, operate model, everything to come together. And the API platform for us acts as a catalyst, tying all these worlds together, making sure that we can deliver this service. Now, because it's all reusable, it's not a monolithic, static, strict structure. It's very modular. So we can take it from the racing environment and we can move it into things like sports, concerts. We can put it into mining. We can do public safety. There's a number of different use cases now that we enable, not because we built the technology to enable them, but because we paid attention, built the ecosystem piece by piece, and now we have this reusable toolkit. So we think that is an approach that will actually help us. It's an innovative approach. It's a different way of looking at it. It's reusing the foundations of the programmable networks and the network APIs. And it gives us the opportunity to look at different ways of monetizing the network value, of deploying those capabilities in different settings. But the open ecosystem is componentized, it's adaptable, and it can work in any network. Again, plugging into those universal standardized network APIs and allowing us to overcome problems, not just in 5G or 4G, but across the spectrum of networks. It opens up new business models as well, being componentized and having this. So, we can sell solutions, right? And the industry can sell solutions in this way. You can define service maps, solution maps, just like you would in service-oriented architecture, saying, here's all the modules that come together. But interestingly enough, you get to sell the APIs as well. You can do it directly to developers. You can go to aggregators, you can go to marketplaces. So we have a new set of constituents and stakeholders in the developer communities that you can go after as well. Not only that, but you can also become part of a federation of operators, and you can federate your services, buy services from another operator, sell your services out to another operator. And finally, the big one is the use case driven growth, or the outside in approach. Iterate, understand where the value is going to come from. And through all of this, I think that we as an industry will discover where the growth is going to emerge from, where the value is best going to be represented, and how we can deliver it. I'll end with just an introduction, actually, about Shibodi. We're a company, small company. We're founded on the premise of network awareness and making applications network aware through the exposure of network APIs. So we've been working for a long time to build a platform that connects applications into networks, and in fact enables this open componentized ecosystem concept in multi-access, multi-network, and multi-operator environments. The big problem that we overcome is removing the barriers across the networks. We work with Chimera. We're part of Chimera still, as I mentioned earlier. We work with Open Gateway and think that's a brilliant model that ties everything together. We're part of ORAN. We're working more with TM Forum and a number of other integrations. We have a sandbox. We're not SaaS, we're not a service provider, so we don't have the ability to do a PI for Chimera or whatever, but we do have a sandbox. And welcome anybody that is interested to come and explore it. And with that, I will end my presentation unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I haven't seen any questions specifically for you in the Q&A or chat. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists and all the participants. Thank you very much. And just a reminder that this was recorded. It will be made available at understandingnetworkapis.com in a day or two, a couple of days. And yeah, thank you so much all for being a panelist and for looking at this and for helping spread the word. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Magnus.
Thanks, Magnus, for moderating so perfectly. And now I wish all enjoy the match in, I think, 1.5 hours.
Yeah, I was surprised Dean didn't take off his shirt even for the presentation. Okay, thank you.